serve on the review board. They have a journal once every quarter, I think. So I'll review articles that are submitted and help out with the conference. And then, so just nice validation for being involved in that organization.
A very big honor, both for Matt and for the Unified School District. So congratulations.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
I know Coach Fiedler is on. Like to say something about your state individual wrestlers? Coach Fiedler?
Yes, I'm here.
You'd like to talk about your individual state wrestlers?
Yeah, so it was a very good day for our guys. For those of you that don't know, we qualified 6 wrestlers to the state tournament. Lucas Sullivan, Taryn Riley, Nolan Springer, Mason Hughes, Bo Hansen, and Daniel Nordstrom. All 6 ended up placing, with Daniel and Bo placing 6. Lucas Sullivan and Taryn Riley placing 2nd, and Nolan Springer and Mason Hughes placing 1st at the state tournament. And, I will obviously talk about it and more so the team context coming up here shortly, but it speaks to the drive of these kids in this weird year with all this COVID stuff, and being able to persevere through it, to be able to accomplish what they accomplished. And, with what they were able to do at the individual state tournament, we were able to win the team points at the individual state tournament, even though that's not necessarily a WIAA recognized feat. It's certainly worth noting the accomplishments of those kids. On top of that, not only the guys individual state tournament, another thing that's not recognized by the WIA this year, but will be next year. Kylie Rule also competed in the girls state tournament that's put on by the Wisconsin Wrestling Federation, and also placed 2nd at that tournament. So I want to make sure to recognize her. But overall, those kids did an outstanding job at both of their respective tournaments, and they worked their tail off, man. I couldn't be prouder of those young individuals, and especially to our 3 seniors, Nolan, Mason, and Daniel. I know they will be successful going forward, and look forward to seeing what they do as they become adults in the real world.
Congratulations to the individual state wrestlers, qualifiers, and champions. Nice segue, Coach, right into the team championship.
So after the individual state tournament, we had our team state tournament the following weekend. Going in as the 2 seed, we had a outstanding duel against Random Lake where, we were able to win that match by a couple points, and a much closer match in the finals against Coleman, winning 33-32. Obviously, and it goes without saying, Lucas Sullivan is a man amongst boys with what he was able to do. Full disclosure, I thought we did not have the tie break. Turns out we did, and I didn't find it out till midway through Lucas's match, because I had told him that we don't have the tie break, and the team needs a major decision, need him to win by 8. So we were able to get 14 points of the win, and not an easy feat to ask of a young man who is extremely talented, but going against a very tough kid who placed 6th at the state tournament the week before. But he had fire in his eyes and was there wasn't going to be any stopping him. So I couldn't be prouder of that young man. As the team as a whole, I mean, it was Coach Schmitz talked about it at the pep rally, and he's he nailed it on the head, saying it was one of the ultimate team wins that he had ever seen, and it's 100% right with not only big wins by certain individuals, big pins by certain individuals. Obviously I could go through the 7 winners in that match, which was Lucas, Reed Spurley, Taryn Riley, Trapper Nofsker, Nolan Springer, Mason Hughes. I think I'm forgetting one, and I apologize that I'm sorry, Mitch Arrett. And Mitch Arrett, the other one, but also, those that did not give up big team points. I point specifically to Will Straka only given a major decision. Joey Robinson with a huge major decision that he only gave up 14 points. And from top to bottom, I'd like to recognize at least the wrestlers that competed there. Ross Lindsay, Hayden Bach and Jimmy Tibbetts, Bo Hansen, Daniel Nordstrom. I think I nailed everyone, but again, those guys did an outstanding job for their 2 dual matches, and the big thing too was those that did not compete necessarily at that state tournament. They had a huge job of preparing those guys for that team state title match, and it wasn't exciting at the time. It was real nerve-wracking, but it was exciting to really look back and see how those young men and women were able to accomplish that feat. And again, I'm proud and so very lucky to be able to coach those young kids and watch them grow throughout the year. And again, in such a odd year that we have to go through all this. So again, thank you guys for recognizing those young men and women.
Congratulations to the 2021 state team champs. And Coach, we brought your hardware into the library so people here can take a closer look at it. So congratulations. Last but certainly not least, Coach Keys from the girls basketball program.
Before I talk about our girls and our season, I just want to first, before I talk about our girls and our season, the administration, the board, for working in conjunction with each other and allowing the student athletes the opportunity to play the season. Curtis touched on it, the way we've navigated through this, a strange climate. I really appreciate everybody's efforts in this room, and it allowed these ladies the opportunity to compete every night, to get better, to work on a common goal together. Extremely proud of them. We had a great year, 17-6 overall, conference champs, regional champs, sectional champs, and obviously state runner-up. I thought we played fantastic on Friday. We represented this community very well. Played hard, just came up a couple possessions short, but really, really proud of them. I want to thank Coach Fiedler. I want to congratulate Coach Fiedler and everybody else, all the teams that competed throughout the year. Football team had a great year. Volleyball team had a great year. Cross country, gymnastics, obviously wrestling. But ladies, I know you're looking on. I'm proud of you. I've said it over and over. Our seniors, Haley Murphy, Ivy Livinger, Emily Cody, and Macy Ashelman. Juniors, Mallory Lindsay, Ella Chambers, Blair Waters, Delaney Ross, Jade Nordolf, Jada Sudmeyer, and Ella Bruno. And then our sophomores, Kevin Winger and Kay Cox. They just did a fantastic job. I've got a great coaching staff in Mike Chambers and Sam Renner. So, but again, I think it starts with the people in this room. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to compete. And we represented ourselves well. the school well and our community well. So thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Right. With that, I'm sure the rest of the board would like to congratulate everybody as well. I will say that that was the very first basketball game I've ever watched. So
That hurts. That really hurts.
I apologize because all I've ever done as a wrestler was talk bad about basketball players. And my wife was laughing because I was jumping up and down, yelling at the TV. So it was exciting, I will say. But with that, we'll go on to the approval of minutes. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the minutes?
We'll do so.
Maybe like the second.
I'll second.
I got a question, Nate.
Yeah.
On the closed session minutes from the February meeting. Can I get a copy of that after the meeting?
Angie, you have a, can you get Larry a copy of last month's closed session minutes?
You don't have to do it right now, but after, yeah. Okay.
All right. Any more discussion, questions on the minutes? Not, we'll call the question, please.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Eisner,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Stefan,
Yes.
Chambers,
Yes. Motion passes. Communications, board communications received. We'll start.
I received a few letters, I should say emails. One, I guess, questioning the reasoning for the virtual day scheduled for tomorrow. I think we all received that one. A couple people asking me some questions, and I'll disclose that in closed session if I will. I really don't want to mention any names.
Yep, absolutely.
And then we got one today about one of our topics tonight. I read it like.
And
I got a few emails recommending that we stay at the 4-day plan. And I did get Jenny's email earlier about one of the policies on the agenda.
okay.
I only had one email that was addressed solely to me, and it was regarding some of the challenges that we would face if at the elementary level if we resumed a 5-day model. So I would certainly incorporate that into my speaking points when we get to that point on the agenda.
I received the same. I do want to make one quick board comment. Just congratulations to everybody in the school district. I think the success of our students in extracurriculars reflects very well on our staff and parents as a whole, that they were able to succeed at such a high level in multiple sports in such a weird year. Along those lines, another extracurricular we have is the musical, which is happening this weekend. That is because of COVID. We have the first opportunity to do that online. Another group of students who have put in a ton of work, and I would just encourage everybody, as most did, to watch the state tournament, to grab an opportunity to tune into one of those times. I know they're working very hard as well.
For me, I got comments regarding 4 days versus 5 days. The majority of the comments were favoring 4 days for various reasons, which we'll discuss later. And then a nice interchange regarding the new policy about gender and locker room and space like that. So that'll come up with policy reading.
I got a few things, Nate. I picked up my first grader a couple of times through the fall and through the winter. For some reason, I just was not able to get in there to pick the child up, and I was, and of course, I knew the parking was not great with the construction, but I think it's time that we look at putting a sidewalk down Hopper Street in our hopes of there along the street. every time either dropping her off, picking her up, I seen kids, I mean, they must have been pre-K, they were pretty small by themselves, walking up a street, cars parked on one side, traffic trying to pass one another, and them kids shouldn't have been on the street. And I don't know if it's the city's responsibility to put sidewalks in, but we own the property. I think we have plenty of money in Fund 46. I think it's time now that we at least take a sidewalk down Cawthorn Street to Fifth Street. There's plenty of room there.
I see that commonly when you go.
Right.
We'll look into that, Mitch. You wanna?
And it's been brought up to the board before.
We've talked about it.
Yeah. I think it's time.
Okay.
Did get a letter also with a few questions on it regarding taking tomorrow or going virtual. That's the correct way to say it. So these are some questions that the parent had for me. How do you justify forcing approximately 360 students to stay at home in order to test 60 students? That's what's in the junior class, okay? What about the 700 plus parents who are impacted and have to change their plans? Okay. Again, these are questions from a parent. How are ACTs managed in the past and why the change? Is going virtual or ACT testing setting a dangerous precedent? Will we go virtual when fourth graders need to test? Eighth graders are taking the test. From what I understand, the ACT plus writing, that's what's being taken tomorrow, is 3 hours and 40 minutes, 4 hours. So that's why we disrupted the whole day is for approximately 4 hours. Your questions. Having the ability to switch to virtual on any given day can easily be abused by administrators. Case in point, students, example, faking sick to sleep in. Parents have been patient, but at what point is enough enough? Our students are being cheated out of 20% of their in-person learning every week with the format that we understand. Administrators need to be more transparent and accountable for these decisions. The decision to go virtual tomorrow should have been at this level, not through an email chain. We had this same discussion back in November when we decided to put the virtual, and I thought the board was on the same page that them decisions should come from the emergency meeting, so be it. Are IEPs in compliance while we are on virtual Wednesdays? Are staff members required to be in the building on their contracted days? Okay. A different parent reached out.
Can I answer any of those, or can we have some of those questions?
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry. Yes.
Sure. Yeah. And you'd like to answer the IEP question?
Yes, we've had countless meetings throughout the year. I mean, some families we've met 4 or 5 times to adjust IEPs according to how what model we're in, but all of our IEPs now include, I believe all of our IEPs now include language about what the services look like for if we're 100% virtual versus 100% in person versus a combination of hybrid. We have multiple students we're bringing in on Wednesdays for one-on-one support and small group support. So yes, I feel that we are in compliance with all of our.
So the IEPs had to be changed. The original IEPs,
Yes,
if they were to be one-on-one for 5 days and he went 4 days,
well,
they had to be changed.
yes, we've been changing them.
And are they all changed?
I believe so.
Because that's very important, and our school can get into a lot of hot water if they're not changed. Thank you, Angela.
The staff members are required to be in the building on Wednesdays.
Support staff.
Yep.
And you verify that?
You got time cards that get turned in by all, so they're either taking it as a sick day, a vacation day, or they're putting their hours in there in the buildings.
Okay.
The testing schedule is almost identical this year as it was a year ago. The only, for ACT, the only difference was last year, we were able to send some of our students off to places like Vortex or Epic, or we did some of those site visits with some of our upperclassmen. Obviously, due to the pandemic, we can't do those kinds of things.
So I understand the ACT takes place inside the gym
It does,
and bells are turned off.
correct?
So what would be the difference if there were students in the rest of the building? Now, somebody could stand in front of the gym and keep students quiet. I understand.
We have done it that way in the past, but again, the testing schedule this year is identical to what was done last year. So it really isn't a change. As a matter of fact, if you remember right, last year when it was ACT Day, for several students, we pushed it as, here's our virtual learning opportunity, not knowing we were going to be going to virtual learning in 2 weeks time. So I mean, the schedule was almost identical this year to last year.
That should have been discussed in an open meeting then, so everybody could hear that, the reasons why we were going to put the virtual for high school, middle school.
And the ACT exam is scheduled in a way that we do not have control over them.
Yeah, thank you for answering that question. I had that question earlier.
I guess the one thing I'll say is when we received the question, my response was basically, I said, I don't care. What that means is if I say I want it, it didn't matter if I didn't want, because in the end, I knew we were gonna have a virtual day anyway. Problem I kind of have with this now is when I found out today that my son's gonna be done with schooling at noon tomorrow. So I didn't realize we were gonna have a half day of virtual schooling tomorrow when this was sent out. Did anybody else get that message? I thought it was gonna be a full virtual day like they had when they were home. So they were, not quarantined, but when they went virtual, the athletes did. They had a full day of virtual schooling. It was my understanding that tomorrow was gonna be a full virtual day,
So they will still meet all 8 of their class periods.
25 minutes, right?
Right, so I think, and my understanding, and I could be wrong, so I'm looking for correction, is that they will get all of the instruction that they would get if they were physically in the building. What they won't have during that 25 minutes is the opportunity to complete the work that they might have if they were in math class and were taught a lesson and then had time to work on an assignment. That assignment portion will be done in the afternoon independently. But
Correct.
that was my understanding.
That would be the schedule that we had put forward for the virtual days. If we were to change that, so that's why we use that here. Just we talked about early on, what was the plan if we had to switch to virtual? We had that 8 to noon schedule. That's why we went with that schedule. So, but yes, it is because they'll get their instruction for that 25 minutes and then they'll have work time in the afternoon for those.
The last request, a question, you could call it. We brought it up earlier, at least I brought it up earlier a few months ago. With Mitch, with our coronavirus federal relief programs that we're going to be accessing for reimbursement, could you, Mitch, check into them programs to help offset costs that have been incurred by parents for the days that parents have been forced to take off while their kids are virtual? And this could begin at the beginning of the 2021 school year. This could be for daycare services, for mileage for the 27 students that had to open and roll out to seek the education needed, lost wages, etc. It seems like the government's pouring money in for everything else, and certainly when our parents need to take off to take care of their kids because we flipped to virtual, whether it's 1 day a week or for 2 weeks if there's a positive case, there's a financial impact to these families. And I'm not saying we need to use our school budget to do that, but I'm surprised there hasn't been an avenue for resources to this date for that reason.
I know open enrollment, there's no mileage paid for open I know that it's stated on the forms that the parents fill out when they fill out the own paperwork.
But our families open enrolled out because of our hybrid plan, which was due to the coronavirus, as Dr. Lindsay said before.
Right.
And so it put them in a difficult position to do what's best for their family and for their kids. And they sure are incurring extra costs by driving their kids to a neighboring school district multiple times a day to and from. And I don't think it's fair to them parents.
I just would question, Larry, they open enroll, does that mean that they made the decision then to enroll and to do those things?
Because they were not happy with the decisions that we were making at this board as a whole.
But I'm thinking they still have the opportunity to stay here. And they made the decision. So if you make a decision to change.
I understand.
See, I'm thinking, wouldn't you incur the cost of that decision?
I understand, Doc, but they made that decision, knowing that they're what this district was doing was not going to fulfill their needs for the educational.
So then we had kids also open enroll here. Okay.
Well, and I'm only talking for the coronavirus pandemic. I'm not talking about to be on the basketball team, to be in the musical. I'm not talking anything about that. With kids that open enrolled out this year, because
there are some students that open enrolled here due to the fact that we were in a hybrid in the fall of the year. That was basically stated on their application.
And
process.
certainly this could be a voluntary request if parents feel that they don't need reimbursement.
I don't know that the CARES money would do that. I can look, but I don't believe.
I think it's worth asking, Mitch.
I will look into the CARES money and allowable expenses for that.
Because what I understand, they passed was it $1.9 trillion?
Yeah, we won't see that money for a while yet.
Right.
I haven't seen anything from the second round of CARES money or ESSER's money yet. So I haven't seen any of that money.
I assume some of that money will be coming your way. I mean, that's fair to assume.
Right, yeah. Not my way, the district's way.
Well, I just worry about the thousands of students that have been home and all across the country. You know, every parent would ask for some reimbursement for daycare, travelers. We're talking millions of kids that were home.
I understand.
And I just think,
I understand.
how can we afford that?
All right, well, Mitch is gonna look into this. If it comes to light, then obviously we'll look into it and we'll have the answer.
$1 trillion.
So, was that it for board communications? It's pretty much same as you guys heard. And right now we will take communications from the citizens. And if you are online, I would, please ask you to raise your hand on your icon and then state your name and address. And we're going to limit things to 3 minutes per. So try to keep it short. And right now I'm going to get the list. And also, I would like to remind everybody that the Wisconsin law prohibits us from discussing specific employees or their job performance on here. So please refrain from doing so. First up, we have Tom Ingwell.
I have a letter that we created as a staff just to show our sports up in elementary. I like to read to the board, so thank you for letting me read it. As members of the Interpoint Elementary staff, we are ready to express our support of maintaining the 4-day model to support both in-person and online instruction. As a professional community, we feel that maintaining and continuing to improve our instruction is the key to ending the school year successfully. Some reasons why we support maintaining the 4-day model. For the teaching interns that we are supporting virtual learners, they still need time to collaborate with grade level teams to make sure their instruction is aligned with and equitable to in-person instruction. To say we support 4-day model is to say we support all learners both in our building and out. We have students that we have identified who can benefit from getting additional support and educational services on Wednesdays. These students have adaptive and special education supports. To say that we support the 4-day model is to say that we support closing the equity gap in our students' learning. We are a school that is navigating pandemic health protocols while managing remodel projects and to add learning space to our small school. Because of the pandemic, construction, and weather, we are limited to how we can offer opportunities for the kids to have a break from the classroom and to offer opportunities for the teachers to have uninterrupted time. Time to eat without supervision responsibilities, time to prepare and organize instruction, time to plan from and record assessments. To add a 5th day of in-person instruction would take away the time for teachers that the teachers need to collaborate and plan their teaching, time that there would be an other year built in the normal school day. To say that we support the 4-day model is to say that we support the professional art of teaching. As you make your decision, we urge you to support us at the elementary by maintaining the 4-day model. We strongly believe it is the best option for us, for everyone in our school community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next on our list is Penny Wick.
Is it okay that we haven't brought up the subject yet, or you haven't brought the subject yet?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. It's been brought to my attention, and I understand the school board must take the transgender issue up. What my concern is, I read your notes, and I see you have covered the transgenders completely. Very proud of you. But what are we doing for our students that are sticking to their bisexual? Are there provisions for them in place for their rights, the right of privacy, safety, protection? Is that made available for our students? Is there written provisions for these students that they're protected? And if they are written, is it open to the Mineral Point citizens that we can view it? And if there isn't, why not? And someone asked me to ask, can we install unisexual bathrooms throughout the school?
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you for listening to me.
Absolutely. All right. Is there anybody online that would like to communicate with the board? So please raise your hand icon.
Bob Oberhauser.
Okay, Bob Oberhauser.
Can you hear me okay?
Please state your name, Bob.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can? Okay. Yeah, this is Bob Oberhauser. This is regarding the junior prom, which is now senior prom, and the current junior prom. An email that went out said that the parents can't be present during the grand march. I don't know if that's in flux. Maybe something's changing now. I'm not sure if it's in stone or not, but they are also talking about combining the junior prom and the senior prom now on the same evening, which I'm not sure if the reasoning for that is for COVID or not. Probably seems counterintuitive, but but my concern would be more of traditionally parents are usually there or can be there for the grand march, which kind of makes sense that they could make some accommodations for that, or maybe phase the juniors an hour apart from the seniors so that can be done. I do believe there has been sporting events in the gym that allowed people in the gym during this pandemic. I would imagine something like that could be done for this too. It's just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. All right. Any more? Something coming up? All right. We will go on to items for information and discussion, starting with the building project update from Tim with HSR.
Thanks for having me tonight. I was on site before the meeting, and if you've been on site, it's getting a little muddy over there with everything going on. So if you do go over there, just be a little bit careful. Some of the work that's been happening in February in particular, hopefully hopefully you've seen some images of some of the work in place. It's looking beautiful. They've installed a wood floor, and all the striping is in place. The blue stain, looks really good as well. So a few pictures on the side over there. They continue to paint and install some of the floor finishes in there. The library flooring is in place. You can see it there. Some of the libraries really starting to take shape in the library media center. Some of the built-ins, the storefront, the aluminum framing systems, the window systems are all getting put in. Continuing down the finishes. The next step in the library is really install the railing system in the area. A few of the other updates that's going on. You can see some of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing. The mechanical space is getting full. That's a good sign. It means they're getting ready to do switchovers of multiple systems. The electrical switchover happened last week for the main electrical as well. Some of the restroom finishes are going in. So here we're looking at a unisex restroom in the main part of the main street. So good public access, also good access for the student body. And then some of the lighting in the library space going in. A couple of views looking in the loft space. So what we're looking at is a collaboration area on the left-hand side. A tabletop work surface in there. Some nice accents of the tiling. And then looking into that loft space that overlooks the library media center. We are in conversations with the furniture vendor, Demco, to really outfit these spaces and really make best use of that space and have a lot of flexibility and collaboration. So I think that process has been working very well. On the right-hand side, you'll see where the skylight is going to be installed. That's planned to be installed over the next month here. So it's a temporary cover that's over that with the wood lamp structure in place. So over the winter, they put a temporary structure over there, and that will incrementally be put in place here. A couple other views looking the other ways. So they're wrapping up the building addition. A lot of the things that are still happening are really behind the scenes at this point. A lot of the access control systems, the security systems, the camera systems, the life safety systems, your sprinkler systems, fire alarms. So while a lot of the finishes are going in, there's still a lot of work that's still happening, a lot behind the scenes. Cool. Overall progress update, we're right on schedule where we want to be. We're month 12 of 18, so we went through 12 months of construction. And especially through the pandemic, it has affected, the construction as well. We are still on schedule to meet the May time frame for the building addition to be turned over for that. And then the next component is starting some of the renovation as well. It's probably pretty small here on the screen, but if you remember some of the phasing plans that we're looking at. So the building additions are the areas that they're focusing on. A lot of the building additions, to make those achievable, we had to do a lot of switch over of the major mechanical, electrical, plumbing, gas systems. So a lot of that work is in place and very much on track. We do have to go through testing and balancing phase yet, as well as what we call punch lists to make sure that it's all properly turned over. The areas of renovation that we are continuing to look at in a little more detail. Hopefully able to streamline the construction process as we keep moving forward through that planning process. Budgetarily, update every meeting. There's not been any new updates since our last meeting last month. So the project is remaining on track financially. Again, the biggest unknown was the rock removal as far as the unsuitable soils under there. So a good portion of the project contingency did go towards that. Otherwise, from an overall project perspective, it's been going very smooth. We're about 67% complete for time frame, and billing wise, we're about 60% complete. So we're on track with both of those. So, short and sweet. Is there any questions, comments?
Just for people who are logging in, this will be uploaded to the website under the renovation tab, or at least the photos will be.
Yes, I share this with Joelle and she puts it out there.
Yeah. Second thing is, I'm sure you've heard there have been some complaints about how hot the school classrooms are, especially on the construction side. Can you help me understand why that's happening, and it seems like it's taking a while to remedy the problem.
So we have bi-weekly meetings. It has been discussed at almost every meeting. Since that, they've made provisions to help with that. A lot of it has to do with the temporary nature of the systems, that we are very much in kind of a transitional phase of the switchovers. And the existing system is operating, but the new system is getting up and running. So there's been a little bit of a challenge is making sure that both systems can operate the way they need to and make that switch over. They've done different provisions. They've insulated some lines to help with that. They've worked with different avenues to block off the existing unit vents, in particular to adjust the airflow. There's been provisions in place to adjust that. One of the challenges is the existing building does not have cooling capabilities within it currently. So you really have some limited options to be able to add any kind of cooling in there to find that.
So if I understand this right, and sorry, I'm not a construction guy, but so the pipes for the new addition are close to the old building, and they're being primed and run constantly or at a regular basis to get the new heating system.
They're set up based on,
running?
they're set up on the outside air temperature. So the colder it is outside, the more hot water runs through those pipes. And in essence, some of the floors, some of the classrooms upstairs now have radiant in-floor heating because those pipes are heating up the concrete slab underneath. And then if you're underneath that, obviously you get extra heat coming out of your ceiling. And with the univents, they circulate air, they'll pull air in, fresh air from outside, but also they'll pull air from the classroom off the floor. So they're pulling hot air off the floor for the in-floor radiant heating and pushing out the hot air. So they've done things like turn down the water temperature. They've overridden the system so that if it's 20 below outside, they're not allowing it. They were trying not to allow that to influence what the boilers were doing. There were some communication problems for the computers, talking to the classrooms and back to the main computers. I mean, there are a lot of things that they have tried to remedy that. And I believe that temperatures are coming down. They're still not where they need to be, but they are coming down.
Thanks.
Yep. What was mentioned earlier about unisex bathrooms, Tim. Tell me the trend in public schools and construction now. Do you see more unisex bathrooms being added to schools?
Not only, restroom conversations, but just flexibility. Okay. The more flexible you can make the buildings, the better. Not knowing what the next 5 years, much less 20, 25, 50 years will bring, we design the buildings to have a lot of flexibility. One of the things that tends to have a lot of flexibility is the way that we set up restrooms. Okay. So the way that we typically set up restrooms is put them everywhere, or I know around the building where you need them, and add a lot of flexibility. A lot of single uses are becoming more popular because they lend themselves to a lot of flexibility within the district. Not only for a lot of different conversations, and just overall just usability of the facility. So it is becoming much more common than it used to be. There is still conversations about just how to best approach different conversations, but usually the way that we approach it and the way that most people do approach it is just with flexibility.
In the picture there, it was one single use bathroom in the addition.
So that's the one in addition, and then we have a series of 5 others within the rest of the facility model. Yep.
Thanks.
There had been some conversation about potentially providing you access to the elementary gym / cafeteria while the students were still, while school was still in session, to maybe give a jump start on the next phase. Would that adjust the overall timeline of the project?
Yeah. So that was a request from the general contractor, Kramer Brothers, to help alleviate some of the push over the summer. There is a lot of scope that is happening over the summer time period, and the cafeteria is one area that is receiving pretty significant scope, mainly because of some of the work that's happening in that space. So that was a request from the general contractor to help alleviate some of the schedule concerns and just alleviate some of those pinch points. Some of the conversations that we had was, well, that's not a critical path. So when we say critical path in the schedule, it won't necessarily shorten the overall duration of the project itself because it's not on the critical path, but it will help alleviate potential just unforeseens. The more areas that you can open up early and get into it, it'll only help the schedule. However, the critical path area, the phasing plan is kind of that blue area where we're removing the floor slab, primarily where the early learning education area is.
Darker blue.
Yeah, where you have the most floor movement within there. The reason why that's most extensive is that's where we're basically over excavating that floor and then replacing the slab itself. So that's really the area that is driving a lot of the schedule conversations. The rest of the facility is achievable to be completed over a summertime period, but that area was really identified early as taking a little bit longer, and that's where that bottleneck is happening. The cafeteria will help that conversation. However, it's not a make or break.
Thank you.
So what you're saying, Tim, if Kramer don't start on that till the 1st of June, like the schedule, it will not change the completion.
So we've had quite a few conversations about the overall schedule. What I can say is typical to all general contractors, they don't want to be on site any longer than they have. They incur costs when they're on site. So every day that they're on, they incur costs of overhead. So they're incentivized to also achieve and beat the schedule. The other part of this is when school's in session, fundamentally, they're not as efficient as a contractor, and they know that as well. So they're also motivated to get as much work as they can done over the summer time period. So when we sent this out to bid, we wanted to make sure that we just didn't go for the larger general contractors that could handle a significant project like this. So by opening up the schedule, we also allowed for better bidding climate and also allowed for more bidders to bid on this originally as well, knowing that we had to have some flexibility in the schedule. So we put in the documents, basically their overall requirements for what the dates that they have to meet. And we were hoping, and we still are hoping, that they could beat those and achieve those.
So that being said, sorry. Go ahead. I don't know how to word this. Did you know all along that this could possibly be done when they'd be moving this up for the gym?
They had asked about a month ago, would this be possible? I said, we need to have some conversations locally. I needed to talk to the guy whose classroom this is, and talk to Mr. Renwick, and I've talked to Nate about this.
You know, if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that to get more attractive bid offers, you need to have a more flexible schedule. So I'm saying, if we go back to when the bids were being created, was this known back then that this was going to happen?
No.
So one of the other provisions of any schedule modification is they need approval from the school district to be able to avoid that. So the request from the general contractor to help with the overall schedule, and they presented it as such.
And they had asked, they've been asking, and I, at one of the last construction meetings, we'll have another one this Thursday, was, so does this make it more likely we'll be in September 1 and in typical contractor fashion? Sorry, Nate, it was like, well, I can't say that it would. It won't hurt you, but I can't say that you have a better likelihood of getting in, because again, they come back to needing to get under the foundation and how extensive that is. But you know, they keep saying this would help. They're here. There's things that they can do now in the cafeteria that will come off their to-do list for the summer.
And at what cost is, I don't mean cost money-wise, but at what cost to the elementary school? How are they going to be able to maneuver around that?
Well, Fayette would either have to be in the classroom or outside. And what they would like to do is basically, they would cut a hole in this wall here so that it enters. This is the storage room off the elementary school gym. So then that would be the entrance into the cafeteria and back out into the school. They would put a temporary wall here and block everything off. So basically they're just going to take the gym over. There is this mechanical closet. It will have an air handler put on in it, up above in that area. That's where they'll store some of their salts and snow blowers and those kinds of things there. So they would be working on that, the flooring and those kinds of pieces. They had put out a plan to at least allow entry into the cafeteria and back out.
So where did that end up then, Mitch? I guess in the last conversation, what are they gonna do for us if we let them do it, or did we make the?
That was gonna be my Thursday discussion with, because Mitch Gilbertson is usually on those meetings, and it kind of seems to go from Eric to Mitch, so that's kind of where I've been pushing. It's like, what can we get in return? I mean, you're asking us, because it is a disruption, it is another headache for the elementary staff to go through this. You know, what can we possibly see on the opposite side that's going to benefit the district? And that's kind of position I'm sitting in right now.
I can't help but this has been a rough school year, and the thought of adding one more impediment is really hard to swallow. But if it gives us hope that in this fall that we get to start a normal school year from the get-go, I mean, I guess I think that deserves some thought, but yeah, we got to get something for giving up.
Well, to quote the classroom teacher, I'd rather deal with the headache now if it means in the fall we're in a great place where school is normal. You know, it was a conversation I had with Mr. Engwall. It's like I would rather deal with that headache now if it means we don't have to deal with this the start of the school year. That's where I keep pushing. And I know it's tough to get an answer, a solid answer, because of some of the other unknowns, but that's where I keep pushing for the district.
Well, it seems like it's turned into a negotiating issue as far as 4 days versus 5. And I don't think that's fair to the district. I don't think it's fair to the students. So I think that we need to address that first and see where the board goes. And because the kids should have a place to eat there if it's safe, I guess, to eat. I do got a question, Tim, about the sidewalk that we talked about earlier. Does that need to be surveyed and drawn up by an architect like yourself?
We would probably recommend that you go through a professional civil engineer. We do have a civil engineer on this project. We have the site fully surveyed. So you do have that component. You guys don't want that surveyed. Sure. But we'd be happy to help you.
Would it change the entrance to the parking lot?
More likely not, but it will allow for better access.
Any more questions for Tim with the building update? Nothing. All right. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Jump into the school board election timeline.
Next Monday, the 15th at 7 p.m. will be the candidate forum. That will consist of Dr. Dunn, Justin Skelding, and Bob Janetka has come and filled out paperwork as to be a writing candidate because he did so ahead of the forum, where we have invited him to participate in that forum. Be held in real time. So the Pointer Media kids will be.
I believe they're going to do it similar to how we did it before we got shut down.
I think so.
We had it, right?
Yeah.
It was that week after we got shut down. We had them basically ask the questions and stuff. We will live stream it as well. So it'll be streamed just like a sports game or on that Pointer Media YouTube channel.
Then the election is April 6th, Tuesday, April 6th. You have a board meeting on the 12th of April. 26th of April would be the board meeting to swear in the new members. Whoever the new members are will be sworn in on the 26th of April.
Any questions on the election timeline?
And most likely, I think we've discussed it before, we won't have results the night of the election because of the write-ins that will have to be counted, and then the canvas process that we have to verify those write-ins.
With that, we will go into prom update, Mr. Austin.
So I will share with you what we have or what we've come to as far as agreements and how we're gonna do prom here this year. It is gonna be a joint prom. A couple of reasons behind that. One, if a big event's put on, it locks up our gym for that full week. So rather than locking up our gym for 2 weeks, the rest of the school year, that's part of the reason. Second reason is COVID related. If we were to have a case at that first one and we are not gonna determine or be able to determine close contacts, that second one would be out of question because it's 2 weeks later. So we thought it'd be better. A lot of schools in our area are actually doing joint senior junior proms if they're having a prom at all. A lot of them are, as we have put out there at this very moment, not allowing spectators. They're doing it off-site with no spectators live streaming it, or they're doing it on-site with no spectators, or they're completely moving it back to the end of May, is where a lot of the schools in the area have done too. Way I have put it when people have reached out to me, best worst case scenario. Best worst case scenario is we get prom, we don't have spectators, but our kids still get their prom. So that is the way that we're approaching it at this time. Reality is numbers are going down, everything's looking really well. I'm hoping we have spectators, we're able to do all that. We'll make that call over the next couple of weeks here, hopefully. But I believe it was just one of these, hey, let's get this rolling here, let's figure out the ideas. Okay, right now, this is where we're at. I'm hoping that numbers keep coming down. We don't have to worry about it. We can open it up to spectators as we would have more. Right? We would still live stream it at that point because the spectators we're talking, parents, family, just like a basketball game or something like that, and then we'll live stream it as well. Right? So there'll be a king and queen for both the junior and senior prom, grand marches. We're still working on the details for that. Whether that would be one big one, two separate ones. We're all trying to make it the best possible experience for the juniors and seniors. I don't know if there's questions around that. It is April 17th right now. So it's about a month away, a month and a half or a month and a week away. Talk to them.
I would just emphasize, that, we should apply the same COVID CDC guidelines to this event that we've applied to all our sporting events.
Yep.
And so if we've been allowing, X amount of people in a gym, 6 feet apart, mandated masks, in bleachers, and we've been successful with that, I think we should treat this event the same, especially if parents. And I just want to be consistent with how we treat each event. And if we aren't consistent, what's the justification?
Part of it is you have 120 some students that are going to be technically packed. In a basketball game, you have 10 kids on the court, right? So it's not as many kids on a gymnasium floor as it would be in a normal basketball game or something like that. So that is part of the reason why I think a lot of schools are doing that. But no, I 100% agree. Like I said, I think we put that out there. It's best worst case scenario. Well, we want these kids to get a prom, right? That's the number one goal, is for these kids to experience prom. Ideally, in a couple of weeks, we'll know whether the numbers keep going down here, which would be great. Right now, I would say, yeah, we're having spectators, but we'll make that call here in the next couple of weeks. But I agree. I 100% agree.
I would put an announcement out there, unless there's some objection from the board tonight about, especially parents of the two classes, that you're going to try.
Yeah. Yep. And I can put that back out there. Yeah. I mean, and I've gotten a couple of emails on it, and I understand that concern. Parents want to be part of that experience. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So ideally, yeah, everything will be just like it would normally. I mean, parents will live stream it for those people that can't get into it. There has been some questions about out of town dates. Right now, we're saying no. I don't know how you guys feel about that as well.
I should be no all the time. Anyhow,
it's one of those questions. It's a good question. I had a kid ask me it today. They're like, "Are they going to talk about it?" And I said, "I will bring it up, and we'll talk about it." Right now, we've said, no out of town dates because we're talking about bringing another subset of kids in. But I guess if the numbers look good at that time, then
that's open for discussion at the time. And could there be a possibility of split up two classes, the grand march at 7 for the juniors and grand march at 9 for the seniors?
we're working on a plan for that.
Okay.
yeah, we are working on trying to figure out those details. I mean, that's the part that we need to keep working
Currently, are they going to have a grant march at the same time?
on. I think like one after the other at the moment. They talked about doing one together. I'm not really sure how that would work too. That is more your prom advisors than it would be. Okay. Right. Most years I wouldn't really have much to do. We have COVID though. I want to be informed of things, right? So that's why I know a little bit more. Up to them.
I would just say, I mean, you're planning this event in collaboration with the school nurse and our medical advisor. Is that correct? Or
I have not talked
what kind of
to-
input are you getting? What kind of how to do this as safely as possible?
I think I need to sit down with both of us and talk a little bit more on
Okay.
that. I know a lot of schools are trying to do it. Like I said, most of them are actually trying to do it to like May 22nd or thereafter, so they can have it outside because they're hoping for good weather. May 22nd, we're out of school.
I think that might be wise, especially since we're kind of getting down to the nitty-gritty details, you know,
Yeah.
how many spectators, if any, outside dates, you know, little stuff like that.
So, and I brought up the kids that I would personally go in and put 6-foot circles for everybody. They didn't like that idea. Some of them actually still thought I was serious because I had one kid ask me today if I was serious. I said, no, I'm not going to go in and mark circles for everybody. But, you know, yeah, I think it is probably time to sit down with those two and talk about that. So I 100% agree.
Any more questions for Mr. Austin?
That's possible experience that we can get for our kids. That's what we're looking to do.
Great. Thank you. Budget updates.
Again, comparing a year ago to this year. So last year at this point in time, we had spent 53.8% of our budget. And if you look at the dollar amount that we have spent, last year we spent 6.85 million, 6.86 million at this time, which was 53.8% of our budget. This year we have spent 6.84 million, or 51% of our budget. So our spending continues to follow a trend of we budget for things, we know when we need them, we get purchase orders through, so everybody's getting what they need when they need it. So I think it shows that we're doing well financially as a district throughout our budget cycle.
Any questions for Mitch on the budget? All right. I'm actually going to bounce back real quick. I just wanted to mention to the staff that when we do move out of the old building, I want to mention this, that I'll raise my hand to help. So if any other board members would be willing to help move the staff from the old building to the new school or to the storage. So I won't be on the board then probably, but somebody call me and I will be there to help. But anyway, we will go back into action items. Now,
let's talk about this probably.
we're going on action items. So we're going to go into the first reading of Rule 411.4.
So this policy deals with transgender and non-conforming to gender role stereotypes. We had a policy committee meeting. Angie and Caitlin were a part of that meeting. I can let them kind of speak to that. So go ahead. Ladies.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background. In October of last fall, Caitlin organized a professional development opportunity for our staff through the Welcoming Schools program. So trying to make sure that our school is inclusive and welcoming to all students. And in that process, part of what we learned was they had asked us to gather policies and documents. And so this was kind of a policy that we felt was missing among our other policies. So I started the process of collecting samples from other schools. So I looked at 3 other area school districts. I also, the policy that you have is actually the template that's provided to us through WASB. All 3 schools that I looked at have this exact same policy from WASB. And then they were schools from all over the state. So there was one in Northwest Wisconsin. There was one along the east over by Green Bay. There was one more central, so kind of a diverse area. And so we're just trying to make sure that we focus on protecting the rights of all students in our building. So this would be a rule that is added to policy 411. Policy 411 talks about the educational, sorry, I wrote it down, equal educational opportunities for all students. And then the rules usually specify a more specific, potentially marginalized population of students. So some of our previous rules are focusing on students with disabilities or might focus on race. This one is specific to gender and non-conforming youth. So it would just be an additional policy that supports our inclusive environment and protecting the rights of all students.
Conversation.
So just as a policy committee member, you know, we read this and went through each section and got the input from Angie and Caitlin. I would just say the main themes that I think this policy really preserves are, number one, a sense of privacy, like opportunity for privacy. So we mentioned unisex bathrooms and those kind of things. I mean, I think that the vast majority of students that maybe non-conforming or questioning their gender identity, they less likely want to impose their gender identity onto a group of people, say, you know, if they want to be in the boys' bathroom, something like that, but usually they want to just maintain a sense of privacy and where they're at. So I think allowing that flexibility is good. And then I think that the second policy is also the second part of the policy, which I think is good, is having some flexibility in the rule to apply to individual cases of students that may have making certain requests in terms of bathroom use, locker room use, PE participation, sports participation, those kind of things, which it's hard to apply a blanket statement to. And so I think the policy is intentionally vague for that reason, to allow decisions to be made on an individual basis. You know, that said, just today there was an email that I think was sent to the whole board with some good questions and comments about the policy that I think the policy committee maybe should dig into a little bit deeper, but I don't know what you thought about that, Everett.
Well, I responded to her, and specifically, there were, one point was about the WIA, you know, criteria, gender. As you see in policy 5 here, the 5th part of this, it includes the WIA wording. In fact, it says here that we would follow the WIA policy, so that's already included in one of her requests.
Okay.
And then she asked if the 2 and 3 wasn't redundant. And I replied to her that discrimination, harassment, and bullying, even though we have a policy about that, it never hurts to repeat that that's not allowed. And the same thing about student privacy. We also have that in a separate policy. But I again replied that it's helpful to have this, particularly in this document, because of this unique situation. So I felt that this was complete when I responded to her.
Okay.
So I don't think
I didn't have a chance to come to that conclusion, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't think we need to look into the WIA. I think that it's included in here that Vicky would go by those guidelines. That was my thought.
Okay.
I would like to hear from Matt and Vicky on this policy and what is currently in place with the W5.
Well, what their policy is, the WIA policy, in making opportunities for transgender athletes.
The transgender athletes, the WI policy, if they're going to compete in an event that is not connected to their birth sex, they have to be going through a year-long process. They have to have doctor's certification that this is what's going on. So I mean, it isn't somebody that comes in and says, "Hey, I'm 6'5", and boy, I could make this girls' basketball team a state champ next year." So there are things that the WI's guidelines that they have laid out that this is a much more of a medical process that a student athlete is going through.
So my question is, if that policy is already in place, then why do we need another policy? I'm just curious. We follow the WIA guidelines.
That's with sports, okay?
That's for
So this has to do with
interscholastic
school and
athletics.
Phi Ed, Larry, and how they are managed here within the school, that has to do with Wisconsin Scholastic Athletic Association.
So what state or federal initiatives or policies are we following now? And I'm referring to Title IX. Angela, explain that to us.
So Title IX, as well as 13, 14.
Yeah.
Talks about harassment, bullying, and not being harassed or bullied based upon gender, race, ethnicity, disability, any of the protected classes. It's all about protected classes being treated the same as everyone else. And so a lot of times we make these rules to specifically identify a protected class of students or people who have a history of bullying and harassment. And so it is aligned with Title IX and Title 14 and some of the other protections that are already in place. Those are federal protections. So typically school boards then drill it down to at the district level of the student.
Tell me about Title IX in relation to bathroom use and locker rooms.
Well,
Is it identified in Title IX?
Title IX is more about sexual harassment.
Okay.
For a protected class of people. To me, this policy isn't about bathrooms and locker rooms. It's about protecting the rights and the privacy of people, of a group of people who typically are highly bullied and have a lot of struggles.
And even, like, just to interject,
Yeah.
like, this is a decision that people come into not lightly. It is, I work with students who have gone through this process and have many very concerning social emotional needs through this. They often are not wanting anyone to know that they've gone through this process. They want to be hidden as much as possible. I mean, that of course is a broad, like, it's not meant to be meaning for every student, and that's why it needs to be followed in terms of whatever that individual student needs. I feel this is a very necessary process, because I think we also need to be proactive. Right now, we are in a reactive state where we are having students come to us saying, hey, that I kind of don't fit the mold. What do I do? I need to know, I need to be able to help their parents in identifying what kind of policies we have in place. I need to be able to support their teachers. I need to support them and also let them know, hey, what's comfortable for you. Even, I know that something that is brought up and on the back minds is, because this is different, I think it's sometimes scary for people. And I've heard, concerns of, well, there could be sexual harassment towards someone. I looked up a lot of research over the weekend, and there's hardly any known cases of these, like, of somebody who's identified as non-binary or transgender perpetrating against someone, that they are the perpetrators of these crimes more often. They are the ones that are receiving this victimization. So that's why I think this policy is very important, and why I want to have a strong voice for the students, because I've seen it personally impact so many of them and their families.
Sure. In the open paragraph of the policy, it says you should consult with your legal counsel and pupil services director, Angela, and relevant resource groups when adapting this sample rule for possible use. Name the resource groups that we consulted with.
So we've been working with adaptive schools and welcoming schools, with welcoming schools, which is, I believe they're in Madison.
Yep, they've been based at, I contacted the person out of Madison, that's why I was familiar with them, but I believe they actually offer national opportunities. Yeah. We just had facilitators that were out of Madison. They have an amazing site that they got us all of this teaching staff familiar with, that gave us really great resources that are free. So we have went into a couple of classes and started talking with students about that.
We should hear, the board should hear their opinions and their ideas along with legal counsel, as it says in the policy before the board takes any action on such a policy. it spells it out right here.
So again, this is directly from WASB. So I mean, I also feel like they're a professional organization who has vetted this policy. And I left that paragraph, you can see that it's italicized because it was basically just explaining what a rule is versus a policy. So this is a rule in addition to your policy.
I'm with Dr. Dunn. I think we're a little premature to acting on.
This is just the first reading, correct?
I have a question. So under section 3, there's a statement that mentions that when school personnel is addressing a student, they should use legal name or pronouns that correspond with the student's biological sex as assigned at birth. But then in the following section, section 4, it mentions that a student who's transgendered is permitted to access the men's or women's segregated restrooms that corresponds with the gender identity that the student consistently asserts at school. And so to me, that seems like if somebody identifies with a gender, but it's not the biological gender assigned at birth, we might be calling them a pronoun or using pronouns in relation to them that doesn't match the way they feel about themselves, but then we're telling them it's okay to use the restroom. That seems like a really strange combination.
So we actually, if the student is at a point where they are wanting to talk about this and go through a plan, usually I would assume that they're not making that choice of going to a different bathroom without talking about it first.
Okay.
Because I haven't had that experience. And when the student has said, this is my preferred name, this is my preferred gender pronoun, then we are sharing that with staff. And so it is, it all kind of aligns for that specific student. Does that make sense?
Yep. So
And just to clarify, there are certain things, and I think that's what number 3 talks about too, is there are certain documents, legal documents that can't be changed.
Okay.
So, you know, what you would like to be called, I can certainly call you that, or a student can identify a nickname or a preferred name or a preferred gender. But there are certain documents that we can't change, like we can't change a transcript unless we have a legal court order. So that's part of the conversations that we have with families, as well as what can be changed in school and on records and in class, class rosters and those things, versus what has to maintain your birth name because it's a legal document and we need
And then
a court.
also supporting them if they are interested in pursuing a like legal name change status. I helped get them.
Thank you.
Is there any reason we can't include any kind of verbiage like WIA uses where you have to have a medical professional documentation asserting your gender?
It's rather lengthy if you look at the WIA criteria to participate in sports and what they require. I don't have my phone with me, but I had it on there. If you look, the WIA spells it out really distinctly.
Yep.
That can be included if you wish in this policy. It is included in a sense by saying that we're going by the WIA policy for interscholastic sports. I'm not sure you need that for the rest of the school items.
That's what I mean, but for FIED and whatnot, is that included in WIA?
No, it's not.
That's the
Right,
problem.
that's the difference here. Yeah, and that might be something that needs to be altered, but I don't know.
I would be concerned personally just about making it that strict.
Yeah.
For our students, just because thinking about the situations that our students have gone through, it's very much a process, so it might be, you talk with someone, like I had said, or Angie had said, it's not something that's come down lightly. It's something they've often been thinking about for many years. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, this is where I'm at, help me. What do I do next? And there's a process. And if I were to have to tell a student, you need to get a doctor's note, which one, for a lot of the families that I support, can already be a barrier, because that's an extra thing that they need to get the child to, they need to make that appointment. It's just an extra added barrier to what is happening. And I guess the next piece that I would think is that it's almost like saying there's something wrong. And I understand, some of maybe the WIA reasoning, I guess, but to me that is hard, because it also was originally in the DSM-5, which is what psychologists go by when they're diagnosing. There was something along the lines of gender dysphoria. I can't remember the exact name, but they've removed it because it's no longer thought of as a mental disorder. It is thought of as something that is genetically going on within your brain where you are identifying differently than your biological sex.
These kids are at risk for suicide as well as being bullied and discriminated against. And I think if we make the process even more difficult, it's going to look like a Jewish star on them for the Nazis. I mean, I hate to be that blunt, but that's what my experience was as a physician taking care of kids that were transgender. I'm worried about making this too detailed. I hope they meet with you and they can tell you in confidence and you can work out the bathroom and the sports situation and kind of leave some of this as an undercurrent rather than an open.
I think it's important, at least in my opinion, and Mitch would have some experience too. I think it's nice to reference that there is a WIA policy, but I don't think we should copy it because then if WIA changes their policy, it falls upon us to make sure that ours reflects the current state where it's how it's referenced now. You're going to go to WIA and see the most current version of the policy. I also think part of the FIED thing that I want to point out is our FIED classes are all co-ed. We don't have a girls 9-10 PE or a boys weightlifting or whatever. They're all co-ed all the way through. So if you have FIED and you are a transgender or a non-conforming youth, you're in the same FIED class as everyone else. I think the details about where you're most comfortable changing, we have individual unisex bathrooms. We can work out an individual place for you to change. Those details can, the policy references can be worked out with the building principal and the athletic director, but our FIED courses are all co-ed to begin with, so.
They don't always require changing.
Right.
It might
be changing your
somebody
shoes.
might just put on tennis shoes. I know they were going outside and snowshoeing and skiing, cross-country skiing. There's no changing going on. So there are a lot of times when students aren't asked to change for a FIED class.
And I've had times where we've made accommodations for the students that they didn't have to change because they were avoiding gym.
You mentioned the WIA changing policy. I think it's very important that public schools remain uniform in their policy, especially with extracurricular activities. With various schools coming into this building, I mean, it should be the same. And there's going to be changes. There's change all the time, so we just got to react to that.
I didn't mean that they weren't changing. I meant that by referencing it, we would always be referencing the most updated.
Well, yeah, and they'll change theirs at some point.
Absolutely.
That's what it says in the policy. It says current policy of the WIA. So it means that if they change,
we're still following the current policy. I guess if we actually copied their verbiage and added it, if they were to make a change, we would have to make sure to update ours to be current. That's all I meant. It's just a little more.
And I think with that policy and with what we talked about earlier with Title IX, I think we're covered, right? Personally. And in the end, I think if we discuss a policy of such a nature, it needs to have good, meaningful discussion, not just 20 minutes, pass it, next month, second reading, pass it, and everybody's got to.
Well, I feel like the policy committee did have meaningful discussion. I mean, we met for, I don't know how long, but I mean, I feel like that's what the committee is for, is to ask the questions and to take the time to.
And all board members are invited.
Yeah, and how many board members are there? I'm just curious. Two. Yeah, so there's 2 board members, and in here it says to consult with resource groups. And you guys say you have, but we have none of that information in front of us tonight.
So they consulted with Welcoming Schools and WASB, which are 2 resource groups. and WASB has legal staff. So he can certainly confirm that it's in accordance with state and federal law, which I'm pretty sure, it is. We can confirm that. But share me, what are your reservations for passing this rule?
I'm having a discussion with you tonight, Dr. Dunn, on it. But I'm finished with my comments.
This is
Okay.
first reading.
Yeah, I just,
Well, it'd be helpful to understand where it's in, we can all work together.
I'm
on what's
going to
going
the discussion.
Oh, okay. But you see what I mean? I mean, you bring the points up, but then how do we resolve that?
I guess
Wait for the second reading.
I guess I have just a question. I just need to understand this better myself. I'm kind of, I see all of, WASB is an accredited resource, but I also see Larry's point is we don't have a lot of information on this. I mean, I know you doctors have looked at it, and had a committee meeting, and you ladies have as well. So you say that, we don't want them to have to go to the doctor because that's a big step, right? To me, that's a huge step in itself. I mean, what we're talking about here, correct?
That's right.
That's where I'm a little bit taken back by that. But again, I'm not in your shoes, I'm not in their shoes. So this is me looking, an outsider looking in on it. So I guess help me understand what the timeline would be. So say a student comes to you with these, with these issues that they want to discuss. And I mean, is this a next day kind of thing, or where maybe they're going to go into the other locker room or other bathroom or something like that?
I would say it depends on where they're at. And a lot of times, we have that Unisex bathroom, and that has been my experience for the students that I've supported.
And that's kind of seems,
And it's
I honestly think everybody would be on board, with that. I mean, until farther down the road, because I mean, again, I'm not want to be insensitive for kids change their mind. I don't want to be insensitive to this, but I don't understand it is why.
And I think that's also a hope that we had with the welcoming schools coming to our school, is that we also feel that more education needs to be happening early on, especially, in our younger grades. You see it all the time, right? That boys wear blue, girls wear pink. We're assigning gender before kids are even born. So these are discussions that I do think are something that need to be continued, for the sake of thinking about like the discussion that we have for going to a doctor. I guess I would check in with Dr. Dunn and Dr. Lindsay about even if that is something that we would go to a doctor for. Like, what would
maybe
you,
that's not it.
if you came in for like a 15-minute, check-in, like I know I've sent people to the doctor before occasionally, and then I will have a discussion, but it's usually sometimes around medication or.
I can tell you, it usually comes up when a young person comes in, usually sad and depressed and tearful. And perhaps where a family can't figure out even what's troubling them, and you get them alone with parents' permission, and they start talking about having difficulty with sexual identification. It's really a heart-throbbing moment, because they're finally bearing to their soul to you in a moment of despair, where they're usually in trouble emotionally. They don't come in with an appointment to say, "Tell me what gender is my kid." It's usually in an episode of severe depression or suicide attempt. Frankly, one or the other has always been my experience. The other experience I have with adults that are undergoing sexual transformation surgical procedures, and that's a whole other bag of worms. But the kids, basically it's when they're depressed or suicidal. When I saw them.
And I would say, Nate, I don't think any student would ever start having these conversations. I mean, it takes a lot for them to even come and reach out and start the conversation. And so, no, it's not like a 20-minute conversation with Caitlin and then we're going to change everything. I mean, it's usually months of ongoing and discussion and talking about, family supports or acknowledgement. And even then it's years and years and years of working with them. So
and I guess that's kind of my main question is, I know there's no set timeline. It's not like that, but
I
it's
think that's my main
ongoing for a
reservation.
long, yeah, no, it's ongoing for a long time.
And I think what's tough is that every situation is different. Some may want doctor involvement, some may be interested in getting some medication to help to support with that medication. Some are not. Some are comfortable with just saying, this is how I want to identify. Some are at that place. So it is such a difference in like a spectrum, I think, of where people are, that it's really hard for me to think about telling a child that they would need to go to the doctor for this. And I also think it could potentially be confusing to the physician unless I could have a conversation with them ahead of time. But then I also guess I would wonder if they wonder, like, what do you want me to do?
Yeah, exactly, and that would make sense because obviously that it's more of an issue with you anyway.
So the point of this rule is not to try to put people in a box. Like, are you or aren't you? You know, it's almost the opposite. It's trying to create a safe space for students who really are still trying to figure out who they are and how that might contrast with maybe, you know, how they were born. And it's just to reiterate publicly, you know, and as a rule and as a policy and as a culture at the school, that this is a safe place for you to explore those questions, and no one's going to make fun of you for it or bully you or, you know, force you to do anything that you're uncomfortable doing.
We concluded the meeting saying it's a policy about acceptance and what's the other phrase we use, acceptance and inclusion.
And love.
And love, right. Yeah, correct.
And I'm totally fine with
Yeah,
that. But didn't we send out a statement last summer basically stating that that is what we represent this district?
Oh, you're talking about non-discrimination.
Well, it's about, non-discrimination, acceptance, no matter who you are, what you are. So I don't understand why we have to have a change in the policy now because of this. They're still a human being, they're still a human being, we still accept them no matter what.
Right.
I agree, and
I see your point.
going off your comments. Of course, everybody needs love and compassion.
Right.
When I say everybody, I mean the 750 kids we have in our school. So that they need to be protected, all of them.
Absolutely, and that's why we have these policies, these rules, because it's sometimes it's not enough to just say we include everybody or we accept everybody. And that's why we have anti-discrimination policies to specify who exactly is protected and how.
Why are we doing this? I think we were requested to do this. I don't know.
And
That's a good question. I don't know either.
So just to add to where that came from is that I have been in touch with students who are in this process, and I wanted to know what I am doing
I
correctly.
think we should take this in
Within
closed
this-
session, Caitlin.
What was that?
Do you think we should take this in a closed session?
I will not be talking about any students. So no, I don't think we need to take it in the closed session. I would say that I specifically wanted it to be outlined, what the plan is for how parents get involved, what it is if they say, I want to be called this. Because I was having students say this to me, and unfortunately, sometimes there are also times when there is disagreement between what's happening at home. So I want to be able to say, this is the policy as it's written. This is the thing, these are the things that we can offer you. This is, if you want to go the next step, parents need to be involved. If if this is what you're thinking, this kind of also just outlines for the kids, like just what we are expecting of the district. So especially with the name change, this helps me to know what my next step is. Does that make sense? And it helps it to be clear for what I'm going to share with teachers, and when teachers are asking me different questions, if it comes to their attention.
And yes, I think that our non-discrimination policy applies to every student in our district. But we have other rules where we identify specifically students with disabilities as a marginalized population, and we take the time to focus that they will not be discriminated against, or Title IX with the sexual harassment. This is just an extra protection layer for a group of students who historically have been harassed and bullied more than the general population.
I make a motion that we table policy, what was the number of it?
411.
It's rule 411.
Rule 411.4.
On what basis, Larry? Yeah, so I guess I don't know.
Pending guidance from the state, federal government, and WIAA.
We have a motion. Would anybody like to second Larry's motion to table? If that motion will die.
Mitch, I have a question. As long as, if a first reading is approved by the board, with some board questions of whether it's, in accordance with state statute, federal statute with non-discrimination laws, can a first reading go through while that's confirmed or reaffirmed, or and let's say it needs to be revised, then would it go to a new first reading, or we reconvene policy committee? But otherwise, if it's confirmed that it's consistent with state and federal statutes, then it could proceed to a second reading.
Yeah, the second reading is what puts it into effect.
And
So-
we have edited policies, needing second reading, except with changes made at that. Because I've got some questions as well, but we're going to do this again. Sorry.
And I
Spend a month
certainly-
looking into those.
And we can reach out to Bob Butler at WASB and get his advice on the policy as it's written.
Well, I believe this is my mistake for putting these under action items as the first readings. They should all be under information and discussion as the first readings.
Yeah.
So I don't really think there's any need to take any action on them if everybody's in agreement to move them back to info and discussion.
Would anybody like to make the motion to do that? I guess, can we make the motion to move them back? Would that be, that would be,
I move that we make that item go back to information discussion.
The first 3 points, 1, 2, and 3, all 3 policies.
I'll second that.
I just have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it takes a motion at all.
well, I think to cover ourselves, I think it does, since it is in the action item, just to move them back to information discussion. I'm fine with that. I'm not opposed to that. I mean, to me, it's just a check in the box thing. It's not gonna hurt.
Can I just ask for clarification on if there was something you wanted me to research or bring back before the second reading?
Yeah, the fact, for me, Angela, the fact that what we're operating under now, and are there policies in place through Title IX or whatever that talk about or have definitions about bathrooms, locker rooms, sporting kids about this whatever non-sporting events. We discussed this in great detail. I'm thinking about 4 or 5 years ago.
We had to add it to the student handbook. So gender identity was part of the student handbook, but it didn't go anything into this detail that this policy or this rule, sorry.
So does the student handbook, is there language in there about using bathrooms, locker rooms?
I know there is in gender identity. I don't know that it gets that specific in the student handbook. I know that was a requirement that we add gender identity into harassment, bullying harassment policies.
Comply with Title.
Is
But
there,
again, right? Back then, Title IX wasn't as big of an issue. Title IX is now a bigger issue for schools based on just the last year, the impact on Title IX and educational practices and policies that you have to have in place. identifying a Title IX coordinator. I don't know, most things just recently came out in law.
So are all schools having the same discussion?
All schools would have to have the Title IX conversation. They would have to have that policy. They would have to have identified all of those pieces that make up Title IX. That came out of the federal government.
This policy that's in front of us tonight, that Angela brought, is all schools going to have this policy in front of them?
I don't know if they'll have this policy or if they already have some policy. Some school districts already have a policy like this. Other school districts probably don't have a policy. Or
And how many do you think? How would it be?
I wouldn't have a clue.
You can't take that.
But I don't know what to tell you. I didn't do the research on this policy, so I can't tell you. I just don't know. I
That would
don't
be good information.
What's that?
They said that would be good information.
I don't know of a way to figure that out though. Because I mean, you know, WASB doesn't keep track of every policy that the district has. I'm not gonna take my time to look through 473 or whatever it is, school districts' policies to figure out if they have it or not. I mean, I don't know if we would be able to figure out what percent of schools have this policy.
And I think for this is about our students here. I mean, I get the comparison thing, we do it a lot, but I think we need to worry about what's best for our students in schools.
I have a question. Is there an opportunity for middle ground here in that we talked about requiring a student to work with a doctor being a step too far about maybe creating more stress in an already stressful time for the students and families. If it's specific to the bathrooms and the locker rooms, we have facilities that are individual use. We could, I mean, addressing somebody by a different name or a different pronoun or enforcing different dress code standards, all of those things can be done without necessarily impacting other students. Could there be a line that says, if you get to the point where you do want to use the public restroom of the gender with which you are identifying, at that point, that's where we want to have
It does say that.
medical
So,
opinion.
you know,
I'm sorry if I missed it.
In section 4, it does talk about for increased privacy that there are any number of examples that students could use. So they could use a restroom stall with a door. They could use an area by a curtain, a PE teacher's office, a single nearby single sex restroom. I mean, it does provide them.
Which student is that referring to? Is that referring to the entire PE class of biological females, and then if there is somebody in their gym class who identifies as a female but was born a male and now they're no longer comfortable, they also have the option then to use the private facility?
I would think so.
Okay.
In our experience, and Caitlin has more experience than me, typically students who are identifying as transgender or non-binary want complete privacy for themselves. So they would probably take the, you know, a unisex bathroom and not want to go into a locker room. But I mean, it gives the flexibility that we can work with that student to find a private space that they are comfortable with. And yes, then I think it affords the same privacy to any other student as well.
To anyone else. Okay, so if anybody have a concern about this policy, then the shoe can be on the other foot too. And they can also choose to remove themselves from
And
that situation.
I would guess, I'm guessing that our bio teachers probably already have students, you know, that do identify as the gender they were born, but they're not comfortable in dressing in a, you know, in front of a group. And so we have individual shower stalls, we have individual changing areas for them. So
I think there's a million reasons for that, because you carry extra pounds, because you have a birthmark on your backside or whatever else. So as long as that's available to every student, then that seems reasonable.
The rule says any student who has a need or desire for increased privacy, regardless of the underlying reason.
Thank you.
And the question then, and that's, I guess, maybe the question, and I'm thinking back to the last time we discussed this, and the issue was, because we are, from the last time we discussed this, this topic has advanced and protections have advanced. And the question I have is, as Joni alluded to, and it is the question we got 50 times the last time this came up, is does this, because in your experience, I would agree, you probably have not had the students you've dealt with have just wanted privacy. Okay, but as it seems as time passes, students are getting more comfortable, they're learning faster about themselves, it's less taboo to talk about. So I believe in the future, we're going to have students who identify earlier and who may get to their junior year and identify transgender and feel very strongly about that and want to use the facility that they identify with. And what people are going to want to know is, does this policy allow them to do that? And are we going to then tell the rest of the class who is maybe not okay with it to go use a private facility one at a time?
And I think that again would be a very individual discussion. So talking with the students about it, talking about potential concerns that could come up, to prepare them for what this may look like for them. And then talking with the student about how to go about sharing this with their class and what this might look like and a good space for it to be. I do think it would be very thoughtfully done. I don't think it would be a good experience for anyone if we were to just say, okay, there you go, you have access, we've given you the go ahead. I think that would be very chaotic. So in any situation, we wouldn't want to do that. We want to set all of the students up for a good experience, and for anyone that is in there, if they're not feeling comfortable, they're not going to make that other person feel comfortable, and it's just going to be a not good situation. So I feel very passionately about wanting to make all of our students feel welcome. And so that would be a very lengthy discussion with the student and their family and with other staff members and administrators about what that would look like. So I also want to be clear that this isn't something we're going to just say, if this passes, everyone just gets to go ahead and.
And if I let on to imply, I thought it was just going to be, but the question we're going to get is, if we pass this policy, does that open the door to that situation? And again, I think it would be a long discussion, but I think you're going to start encountering, junior high students who are learning earlier about this, and it's becoming more public and more.
I feel like
Less
the
taboo.
policy focuses on privacy and confidentiality for all students. So one student who has potentially identified one way doesn't negate the other 20 students in the section. It's privacy and confidentiality and safety of all students. And I believe the policy references decisions would be made on a case-by-case basis. And so in your example, obviously there would be a lot of discussion. I think it'd be, really important to include the athletic director, the building principal, the families, the students, Caitlin, and it's going to be ongoing for a long time. And, so I agree that I think there's been a lot of changes over the last half dozen years. But I just don't see that as a case that we're going to see anytime in the near future.
One thing, and you're right, there have been a lot of changes, and the questions that came up when this presented itself was the fact of our middle school, high school setup in this building. We do have middle school kids using the upstairs bathroom, so theoretically we could have a child possibly as young as 10 or 11 using a bathroom with a child that is theoretically 18 or 19. And there are some other laws that you gotta abide by when it comes to that, as far as kids of opposite sex sharing.
I'm not 100% sure what you're asking me, Larry.
When you have an 18 or 19-year-old and you have a 10 or 11-year-old using, possibly sharing a bathroom.
Of the same sex?
Well, you know what I'm saying.
Well, but I feel like that's where we have.
And you say, well, we'll talk through this. Well, who's going to police all this when it becomes reality? Is Vicky going to stand at the bathroom door? And
So again, if we were to look at the research, and I would encourage you, if you're interested, if you learn something counter to this, I looked, and I found in the whole nation, there was one, I believe, incident of somebody pretending or taking advantage in that situation. And of course, we would never want any situation, but for the most part, it actually. What?
Is that in art school? That one person?
Nationwide.
Nationwide, one person that
So
was,
keeping track of
that was perpetrating and saying, I'm going to use this bathroom, and they perpetrated some crime against somebody. And what actually, when we look at more of the research, the people that are going into a bathroom that is different than their assigned birth sex, they are being the perpetrators more often of sexual harassment.
Where's the research coming? What person?
I would be happy to share it with you if you'd like. I looked up
I'll look at it myself.
Google Scholar. So if you look at Google Scholar, they have some different research. And if you find anything contrary, feel free to share it with me. But when I was looking up, because I know that has been a discussion point, and largely it's been the individuals that are identifying as non-binary that are perpetrated against.
Okay, we have a
Well,
motion.
all public schools have to have a policy. So if we have kids that say, or parents that say, you know what, Belmont's got a majority of our open enrolled kids, we're gonna have this mass exodus of kids go to Belmont because of this policy. Can you say, well, Belmont needs to have a policy too?
I can't say that.
So we couldn't turn Belmont in for not having.
I don't know. I'm not as aware of that. I think it's-
Are we held by state law to have a policy? Federal law?
No, I believe it comes down to best practice and protecting students.
All right, we have a motion and a second to move the first readings of 1, 2, and 3 back to information discussion. Is there any more? Kind of all over the place here, but is there any more discussion on, since we're already having it, on number 1? If not, we'll call the question, move it all back to information discussion.
1, 2, and 3, right?
Roll call, what's that? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. So now we will discuss the first reading of policy 421.
Information only, right?
Information, yes. They're all back, we're back into discussion since we haven't, we might as well talk about it.
Yeah.
Here. So,
Policy 421 and 421.1 just have some minor editorial changes. They are admission to kindergarten and admission to first grade, and I would turn it back over to Angie and Caitlin.
So in last spring, we were working with a family to consider early enrollment. And what we found was that our policy is about 20 years old. And so we wanted to update the policy. So some things that we we feel we added, and I just want to add that it was a team, Caitlin and I and our 4K teachers, and then working with Matt Renwick as well. So part of the changes, we shifted from the simply intelligence to more of looking at the whole child. So in some of the policies that reference like an IQ test, and IQ is not a single predictor of success. So we tried to come up with a more balanced look at the whole child when we're considering early enrollment. It's also more of a team decision now. So the previous policy said that the building principal made the decision, but now the building principal and myself and Caitlin and a team of staff members would work together to make the recommendation. We've added some established timelines as well as an appeal process. So that wasn't any part of the decision before. In fact, in one of the policies that said the person should just apply to the board for early enrollment, and you guys made the decision. So we felt we should at least do some formalizing for gathering data and collecting information about the students. And so in looking kind of at the criteria that we wanted to add, I looked at 4 neighboring school districts' early entrance policies. We also looked, Caitlin brought her experience with Madison. Largely Madison's just had a timeline, so it was more of a time-bound process. How many, what time of the year should you apply? An application was created. You expect a response in so many days, those things. But essentially, we just wanted to outline more of a process, because before it was just apply, we'll tell you yes or no, and there really wasn't a lot of details given. So 421 talks about admission to kindergarten specifically. And then the process for 421.1, if you go about halfway down, it's the same process if you are applying for early entrance to first grade as what the process is for kindergarten.
This predominantly applies to students who haven't gone through our own 4K or kindergarten. And so somebody might move in and say, oh, I've got a 6-year-old, I want him in first grade.
Yeah.
And they haven't been through any of our prior programming, we would use this policy.
Or early admission to kindergarten was what came up last year. So it was somebody who would have been in the 4K program this year wanted to apply early to start kindergarten instead of 4K. And like I said, the kindergarten one is about 20 years old. The first grade one is about 10 years old on current board policy.
Do you have any questions?
So no further action, just information.
No, I don't have.
I don't have.
I just got one question. It says for the first grade policy, a child who is 6 years of age on or before September 1st, and then on the kindergarten, it says October 1st, the child must be 5 years old prior to October 1st. Should it be the same?
Okay, so on the first grade policy, it says what?
September 6th.
It says September 1st.
There's second
Paragraph down.
Okay, that actually.
It always has been September 1st.
It is September 1st. I'm sorry, the October 1st talks about that on the kindergarten policy. Are you referencing the October 1st?
On second paragraph, yes.
So what we were trying to limit is we would consider early applicants if your birthday was in September. But at some point we felt like, an April birthday is too far off. So that, it was just trying to limit. So we might have a person who's, my birthday is September 3rd. I started school a year early at the time. It probably wasn't the age requirement or whatever, but so we did put kind of a time-bound end of how much we would consider early applicants, because at some point we felt their birthday was too far away from the September 1 deadline to be considered for early entrance.
So you're just thinking 30 days is all you'll accept.
Yes.
All right. And some kids develop earlier than others. Is that fair?
I mean, you're right. We talked on a team on, based upon what we see in students, and we did pick a date, but I mean, it is a date.
Because Dodgeville's policy may be something different. They'll say, well,
I believe that all the ones we looked at were either October 1st or November 1st. I don't believe any of them were after November 1st. I mean, I can go back and double check, but I believe that all of them had an end date, and we were right kind of in the middle of those dates. Both of my boys were born in, or two of my three kids were born in January, and my daughter could have probably gone to school a year earlier, but I didn't think of it. She wasn't 4, so I guess I want to say that of the 4 we looked at, I think 3 of them had either October 1st or October 15th or November 1st. So
just a little concerning to me, though.
Okay.
Any questions, more questions for Andy?
Thank you.
Okay, now we will go on to action items. Discussion of possible action on moving to traditional 5-day in-person schedule.
To get the discussion started, I'm just going to make a motion that we move back to the 5-day traditional, starting on the first day of the fourth quarter,
Which is Wednesday,
Next Monday.
next Monday.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Let's have a discussion. Who wants to start?
Well, I don't support going back to 5 in person for a few reasons. I think the main thing is, like I said at the previous meeting, I feel like as long as we're offering a completely separate educational platform in terms of 100% virtual, with basically no additional teaching staff, save for a couple interns, I think that we have to give the staff some space to try to meet the needs of all the students, all 700 and whatever, what our total students are. I feel like this year has been a sacrifice for everybody, and students and parents and staff all the way up, and there's certainly a concern that the in-person kids are having to sacrifice some by not being there 5 days in person and instead 4. But I also think that 100% virtual kids are also making a sacrifice as well. As we saw from our previous student testimony, she felt like she had to be virtual, and it was really hard on her. And I don't think she's alone in that. So I feel like the current 4-day plan, as long as we continue to offer 100% virtual option, I think balances the sacrifice as fairly as possible as I can imagine amongst all the students. Because the virtuals are really getting very minimal one-on-one time with teachers, except for Wednesdays. And the in-person students are getting their teachers 4 days a week, and I've been fairly satisfied with the increased workload that's been given on Wednesdays when the kids are at home. I mean, it's not the same, but it's they do have something to do. And the other reason that I don't support a change is because I have not gotten one comment recommending that we change to 5 days a week. Not from a parent, not from a student, not from a teacher, not from an administrator. And on the contrary, I've had the administration support staying 4 days a week. staff supports being 4 days a week. We had a testimony from the elementary staff representative. And I'll need a lot of convincing reasons to go against those recommendations, given the complexity of the school year. And so I say we finish it out as best we can and take stock of where we are academically and mentally, emotionally with our kids and our staff, and get ready to have a summer of recovery and a strong fall.
Mitch, I'd like to ask a question if I could, Aaron, of Mitch. How many kids do we have on virtual now in the school district? The numbers?
On the last Friday update.
I thought it was 112 or something like that.
No, I think the last Fridays it was lower.
Was it more?
Yes. I want to say somewhere.
Maybe the sports guys are back, huh?
Yes, the wrestlers were back. Boys basketball was back.
What is the numbers?
99 is what it says.
Oh, 99.
99.
Okay.
9100% virtual learners, and then others excluding this.
Yeah. And then
Is that broke out by school level?
That is not.
I would not.
and the other question I have is academically, our performance, if I understand it, aren't we doing about as good as usual? Or
As
no?
far as curriculum delivery?
Not curriculum, as far as testing performance.
Yes. Mr. Renwick had shared some of the STAR data, so it was comparable to where we were a year ago between fall and winter testing.
Yeah, I looked at last year's fall winners and this year's fall winners. It's not apples to apples. Got some kids are not the same. They're making progress, and that's around 30% or 25% in the building, right, in person. And now we're at 80%. So I would expect that to accelerate even more so progress-wise from winter to spring.
Well, I think I would echo Aaron's comments. I've not had a single person in favor of 5 days. That's maybe the public I represent. The other thing is, I think we owe the 99 a good learning experience to the 99 getting virtual, which is a significant percentage of the students. The other thing is, I don't think I've seen a drop off in academic performance. So I agree 100% with Aaron that I think we ought to try to limp to the finish line and prepare for a really good next year. And I think we've done a very good job with what's happened to date. So I compliment the teachers.
I don't know how many students are virtual right now for the musical. I don't know if anybody knows that number, but I'm guessing they're going to be coming back.
They will be coming back.
Also, this does represent the musical kids.
Right.
Because that number should be lower. I was expecting it to be lower.
I will say right now there's 0 active cases. Okay. Question. When was the last time we got a report card?
From state?
No, a report card.
Oh.
Because that was a tool. That was a tool that we were going to use.
I'd sent out an update, I hadn't shared the report card, just what the score was.
Yeah.
We were a 7 the previous 2 weeks. Last week, then we were a 5 based on last week. But that's countywide too. That's not the Mineral Point community. That's everybody in the county. And the score dropped to a 5 from a 7. We had been 7 2 weeks in a row.
So I'm going to go back to when we sent that survey out last year, when the numbers were pretty high. And 58% of this community wanted to be back in school 5 days a week. I think it's pretty, I want to say dishonest, but I don't think it's very respectful of them people to ignore their wishes. And right now we have 0 cases in this school district.
I'm not going to argue the fact that Dr. Lindsay and Dr. Doug, we haven't had anybody reach out to me want to go back in. But maybe that's because people that go home deaf ears. I don't know. That'd be my opinion. And I've had multiple people email me, call me on both sides of the fence. And I talked to Mr. Ingwell yesterday, had a great conversation with him. Him and I do not agree. But we answered a lot of questions we both had about many things.
A couple of questions I have. So on Wednesdays, Mitch, sports staff in both buildings, are they still getting, are they still reporting to work? And if they are, what are they doing? Are they still getting paid if they don't report to work?
So I'll speak for my support staff. At the elementary school, every single one of the support staff are working one-on-one with the students that we bring in for extra services. And at the middle school, high school, they are working with small groups of students that we bring in for extra services. So my employees, the special education assistants, are all working directly with students on Wednesday.
How many is that, Angela?
Well, at the elementary, they're all one-on-one. So we have 7 assistants at the elementary, and they're providing one-on-one time for students, student support.
All day long?
Until noon, and then several of them do Zoom meetings, or a couple of them do Zoom meetings with students. And then we have other advisory duties, or we have a lot of intervention planning meetings on Wednesday afternoons that they participate in. So some of our more high need students, we have weekly meetings, and that's the time that we've allocated to meet for them.
So is this everybody with an IEP then that needs to be in person 5 days a week as wrote in your plan?
If the team has decided that the students need a 5th day and support in person instead of virtual, then yes, the students are brought in. Now, is it every single student with an IEP? No, because, you know, a student with maybe a speech language impairment is getting their services on the other days that they're in person. But we do have students that are virtual students that are attending on Wednesdays. We do have students with drop-in services that are coming on Wednesdays. And at the middle school, high school, I couldn't tell you an exact number because it changes from week to week. We have, I would say, 6 high schoolers that for sure come every week, and I think maybe 4 middle school, but then others come because they need extra help for what was assigned, or because they're doing a long-term project and they need the assignment broken down. But the middle school, high school, middle school, high school special ed assistants are all working directly with students as well that are coming in for additional help.
Do we still pay busing on Wednesdays?
Yes.
The entire busing bill as we were running all 6 buses. Yep, that's so sad. How many students are the interns teaching math in your building? Dr. Dunn said that it's unfair to the teachers for the regular core teachers to handle the virtual load. Well, that's what we hired the interns for, correct? Correct. Okay. And how many interns we got again? 4. We got 4. All right. And are they still there on stage? I would suspect they.
I mean, I wasn't quite done yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The other thing we gotta be careful of is we're hearing now about the renovation project and how it'd be easier to stay 4 days a week. Let's not confuse the renovation project with what we have. We all knew the renovation project was gonna happen. Before COVID hit, we assumed we were gonna be in school 5 days a week. All right, we can't use this renovation project as any kind of leverage tool. Now, there's a lot of people down there that don't like the fact, they're gonna have to move. I get that. That staff didn't ask for this. In fact, there was a lot of that staff that didn't want nothing to do with this building. And we know that. There's a lot of people in this community that pushed this renovation project down our throats. Now, when that staff was walking to the school this last winter, when it's 15 below and blowing snow, did you see any of them people offering rides so that staff didn't have to walk to that building? God knows how far. No, but yet we heard about it in the board. Where are these teachers going to park at? We don't have an answer. I'm sorry. You're going to have to walk from 2 blocks away. Nobody offered them a ride. The same people that push, they're not going to stand there and they're not going to help to move this, to make it easier for them staff. They're going to be gone. All right. Nate, I'll go down and help them. I don't care. But we can't use that renovation project as a leverage to only be in school 4 days a week.
Well, the only thing is, I understand that point, but it may be a reality, you know what I'm saying?
Well, it wasn't a reality when we voted on it.
I know, but it may be now.
Well, you can't use it.
No, I think that we should forget about that renovation early. I think there's too much disruption in our school. And yeah, it's a big project, but in the whole scope of thing, with the entire elementary school in that project, the gym's a small portion of that. So I think we're Matt, in your email to the board today, you said that there's little evidence supporting 5 day versus 4 day in-person instruction. What did you mean by that?
I just haven't come across any. Look at the research that's coming out on virtual versus in person. 4 versus 5 in the middle of a pandemic. You're gonna get, is the juice gonna be worth the squeeze? Or is there gonna be negative effects? Especially if we're trying to run 2 schools at the same time, virtual and in person, trying to coordinate the curriculum. So when you take away that planning time, and just to do that with, are there gonna be any positive effects from it?
Well, when we talk about virtual learning at your elementary school, I mean, what I see in the younger grades is primarily a day with the younger grades.
That's not what I've seen.
Virtual learning at your elementary school, then explain it to me, Matt.
I sent out the slides and the video. I don't know.
What, explain to the board what your virtual format is at the elementary school.
Well, it's the slide I sent out on Friday.
I didn't see it. Just explain to the board.
So it's just a variety. It's a lot of either in-person, asynchronous, a variety of both. Some teachers are offering morning meetings and they'll do a quick lesson. And they have a choice board, which you're going to do this and this, and then you'll post their content. So like in your daughter's class, they're posting a science project they can post, and they post the results and see stuff, and then the kids can comment and respond. So
Matt, do you know, I know Mr. Austin didn't know that the numbers separated there and how many are in each school virtual. Do you have any idea how many are at your school? We talked about it last meeting, but I don't remember, and if has it changed, I guess.
yeah, I'd have to go back and look at that. I want to say between 30 and 50.
Man, I have got a concern from a parent, maybe a little sensitive. Under contracted time, Monday through Friday, do you do any book research, or do you support the virtual learning for a potential book, a writing of a book?
Me personally?
Yeah.
I guess I'm not sure what you mean.
Or after all this, will you use the experience of Mineral Point, the virtual learning experience and the research documentation to write a book? I had a parent. I had a parent. So are you supporting the virtual 4 days for your book?
You mean, am I supporting a virtual program to serve my own personal?
Yeah, you first, the fourth, yes.
No, I guess I'm a little disappointed you would even imply that.
I had a parent reach out to me and ask. And it's
But
not,
you posted it, so I guess.
not the first time, not the first time. Yeah, under contract.
All right, gentlemen. All right, no, let's get back to this discussion. We're kind of getting sidetracked. Well, I'd like to hear from a couple of the other board members if they have any
I want to go
thoughts on
back to
this.
what we talked about in August and September. What the ultimate goal was by every administrator was what?
5 days.
Thank you.
5 days, yeah.
We've heard that from other board members. Ultimate goal was 5 days. We sit here, 0 cases. And we still don't feel comfortable going 5 days.
And this is, again,
And we had, yeah.
I don't want to argue this at
No,
all.
you're right.
But my biggest thing
Is the virtual.
is the virtual.
Right, we knew that at the start of the year, that was an
I'm
option.
not sure that we knew that virtual would go the entire length of the school year back when we made.
We
had
couldn't
those
just pull it out,
conversations
you
in
just
August.
couldn't pull that rug out.
I think that for me, that was.
That was guaranteed. Hold on a second.
But I'm
That's
surprised.
not for all of us, though.
No,
When I said my goal was back 5 days, it was 5 days and continue to fully support a virtual program.
That's right. I think to Gary's point, I think if we want to have a discussion
The
to
discussion.
put
is whether
everyone
we
back in
continue
school
virtual learning.
and discontinue the virtual
I'm not
program, we
yeah.
should have that discussion.
I'm not saying that at all.
Because then, that's fine, Gary. I'm just saying, in order for me to buy the safety argument, that it's safe to go back in school, which I don't necessarily disagree with, Gary. I mean, we're getting our teachers vaccinated. We got low cases. We're using precautions. You know, I think if a parent asks me, is it safe to send my kid to school? I would say yes. So, in Mineral Point, I would say yes. So my argument for staying 4 days a week is because we have a virtual program that we need to support. And I don't think we can adequately support it without burning out our teachers. If we go 5 days a week, force our teachers to teach 5 full days, plus try to teach these kids online and have some kind of impact on them academically. Now, if we want to go back 5 days a week and terminate the virtual program, then my concern is eliminated, right? So everyone's in school. We are not taxing the teachers with 2 different educational platforms, and we're all back in school. Now, so we can have that discussion, but, you know, we've got kids that choose to go virtual for various reasons, and it's not just a couple, and we would need to seriously ask ourselves, would a significant amount of students open enroll to another district so they could be virtual for a 4th quarter? I think that's the risk we would take. But I think a 5 day a week in person with 100% virtual program offered to any student is unsustainable at our current staffing.
So your comment about open enrollment now to a school with typical 100% virtual, can anybody tell me a school in our area that?
I do know 3 students that are doing that right now.
It's
It's not in our area. It's an online thing. They are completely off of our program.
Going, but any schools that are not local schools that are not 5 days a week
That offer virtual?
Well, most are offering a virtual program, aren't they?
Like Dodgeville offers a virtual program.
Yeah, are they 5 days a week?
Yeah.
In person also?
Yeah.
Is there any other schools that are not 5 days a week?
In our immediate vicinity, not that I know of.
And that's where I'm going. It seems like all these other schools can do it, Dr. Dunn. And but Mineral Point, we always talk about what great teachers we have and how committed our administrators we have. And parents aren't seeing it.
Parents aren't seeing commitment from our teachers.
Well, when we choose to go
serious?
4 days a week.
I would argue
They don't feel that they've been committed to this pandemic school year. And I'm not asking you to speak for all parents.
You're trying to put words in my mouth.
That's what you just said. Do we want to back it up? You just said parents aren't seeing commitment from teachers and administration.
Okay, if you need me to rephrase that, I will.
I think you probably should before teachers feel like parents don't think they're working hard.
We
have
have
done
heard
this before.
We have heard nothing but from our administration. I have heard very little about getting our kids back in school 5 days a week. Very, very little. When I said we have when we have great teachers, maybe I shouldn't have grouped them together. We do have great teachers. And I think there is a great majority of our teachers that would teach 5 days a week.
Mr. Engel, did you force anybody to how many signatures do you have on that statement you read today? How many?
29.
How many did you force to sign it?
But that's kind of a blatant question.
I mean,
forced to sign this.
Can I talk about the student perspective on all of this? And so I have daughters who are at the elementary age, and I agree that the perfect world students are back in 5 days a week. But one of them came home today very frustrated because it's getting a little warmer outside, so the classroom was a little warmer, and they had to wear masks all day. And then it's muddy, so the playground's a mess, so they had to be on the blacktop, and because there were more kids on the blacktop, they couldn't take their masks off at recess. And they're eating lunch in their classroom, or at least I think they're still eating lunch, and she was just kind of frustrated. And I was kind of thankful that she has to go tomorrow, but then Wednesday she gets a reprieve. So I think that there's also, from a student's aspect, this is still not a perfect, not an ideal schooling situation with the masks and the social distancing, and maybe having that break in the middle of the week is in some way a little bit of a break for them to get them through the next 2 days. I don't know.
That's something that I have here. In the past week. Nice. Very exhausting. You know, all that's going on. That was Wednesdays to recoup.
It's fresh on my mind because it just happened today when she came home from school and we were talking about how the day went. It's just a different perspective that we haven't talked about yet tonight.
So Wednesdays, just to refresh my memory, it is open to whatever student wants to come in, correct?
Some students are required to come in, some students, the doors are open if they choose to come in.
So essentially, if we did stay this way, every student has the opportunity or parent has the opportunity to send their kid 5 days a week. Essentially, not to learn necessarily a lesson, but to be in the school.
They do, but then you create another mess. Well, what do they? That would, I think, you create a more mess if you send 60 random students to the high school, to a school, and who's in charge of them?
I'm just
because the teachers they're trying to do their catch up on the virtual, and then you've got these other 60 kids that are unexpected.
Well, that's what we're asking them to do, though. I mean, that's where I'm torn, man. I mean, that's exactly what you just said. The argument to what I just said is the same argument.
I got a question for Tom. Out of the 29, how many were teachers and how many were support staff, Tom?
I don't have to break down who. It was anonymous. They come at this group before. But I don't have names of who.
It was said earlier when we started this discussion that there have been 0 cases. I did learn of a CDC directive today that you don't need to wear a mask, I guess, if you're in a group of people that have been vaccinated. Did anybody else see that? Am I saying that right? So we're nearing the end that I feel of this coronavirus and pandemic, and it won't surprise me by the end of the year, the pandemic may get lifted by the end of the school year. Pandemic may get lifted. And is that an unfair statement, either doctor?
I think it's a little unfair. We don't know about the 3 variants, Larry, that have, the South African, the British variant, and the other variant. But it's hopeful. 60 million people in the United States have received at least one vaccine. So that's a significant percentage of the population. Perhaps another 25 to 30% have been infected. So we're at roughly 90 million. Herd immunity is roughly 85%. So we've got a ways to go. But it is true what you just said. If you are vaccinated, like I am now vaccinated, we could be looking at each other without masks. But they do recommend that people who've been vaccinated, they still wear masks because of the potential of these other variants and also people that have not been vaccinated.
By the way, it's glad to see you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm 2 weeks out from the vaccine, so.
And that's true too, though, isn't it? 2 weeks after
2 weeks.
the second dose of the vaccine.
That's not talking about Johnson & Johnson.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be 2 weeks after that.
Wait, I didn't know about that.
Yeah. There, I think you have a great question. I think the most significant thing, the way the vaccines are going to impact the fourth quarter is I think you're not going to see teachers as close contacts, and you're not going to see teachers being quarantined because after 2 weeks from their second dose, they will be fully vaccinated. And if they have a kid test positive in their classroom, or if there's a, an unvaccinated teacher who's positive in the teacher's lounge or whatever, they won't have to stay home for any reason unless they develop symptoms. So I think that bodes well for retaining staff in school, use of subs, those kind of things.
I just think we're giving up such valuable time for these kids. And one could say, well, it's only 20%. And one could say, well, we're not giving anything up because they're learning virtually. The kids have sacrificed a lot.
No doubt.
And I agree with you, Joni. There are some, including maybe some of my own, that they like the Wednesdays virtual or partially a day off. That's no secret. All kids.
I'll be the first to admit it's awesome at home.
All kids are the same. Yes, but as adults sitting at this table, we need to do what's best for our kids in this community. And I still have a hard time believing that we're caught up on our academic curriculum. I don't know how that can be. I just don't know how that can be. We lost 3 months last year. The hybrid plan this year, it was a minimal at best. 4 days after the first semester this year. So really, and I'm going to say this facetiously, one could argue, well, maybe we're spending way too much money in education if we're getting the same bang for our buck and the kids are not in school all the time. I don't.
I think you make great points, Larry, and I think there's gonna be some loss at the end of the school year academically.
So you're willing to give that up?
No. What I'm saying, no, let me finish, because I think you make some great points. But what I'm trying to balance in my mind is the loss of the in-person kids and the loss from the virtual kids. Because I think that, I know that other districts are going 5 days a week and the teachers are teaching 100% virtual. And my question is, at what price? I question how the teachers are holding together. I question how those virtual kids are coming along. And I worry about how this year's going to end. And every district's different, and they have different staffing and capacities. And I don't want to say one's better than the other. But I think in our situation, I think the virtual experience has been really hard, and there's no argument about that. You think about districts who have been virtual since day one, 100% in urban areas, and all the costs of that with kids. I think it's hard to make an argument that the 100% virtual experience has been equivalent to a 5-day in-person experience, right? So there's implied that the majority of virtual kids are taking some kind of sacrifice, and there's some kind of loss there. And yes, they chose to do it, but they did it for their own reasons, probably for health reasons, and we have to respect that in this unique year. And I think it's right that we offered this option to them.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to balance that loss that the 100% virtual kids are getting with the perceived loss that the in-person kids are getting, 4 days versus 5 days. And I just feel like if we tip the balance even further to favor the in-person kids and try and give them a better educational experience, the loss gets greater for virtual kids. And it's an imbalance that I can't reconcile at this point.
And you good points. And you make it sound like it's impossible. You look at to balance it. You look at our student to teacher ratio compared to the state average, and where I believe we're like at 13 per, and the average is 15. EPI website. So again, how are these other schools doing it?
I understand, and I question it, to be honest with you. And what I'll say is this, Larry, is we have great staff. We've agreed to that, right? And we have a lot of faith in our staff to teach our kids.
We have some of the best staff.
Yeah. And I feel like our teachers have very high expectations of themselves for how they teach every student. I think they're taking the virtual kids as seriously as the in-person kids. And they're trying to balance their day in addressing their virtual kids and their in-person kids, and they hold themselves to a high standard to cover all of that. And if the teachers came to us and knowing that we all want everyone back 5 days and get rid of the virtual. We want that, we want all back to normal, knowing that it's true. But if the teachers came to us and said, you know what, 4 days isn't working out, the kids are getting behind, and I think we need to go to 5 days a week. I can handle the virtual. We got this. Just trust us and support us. We go 5 days. I think that's a whole nother can of worms, and I would be potentially convinced. But that is not what I'm hearing, you know. And it's the situation that we're in, and I think that you know, changing things in the current situation as it's presented to me is going to create more risk than reward.
What about next year? Will we be back here in August talking about next year with the same situation?
I would be surprised if we offer 100% virtual next year.
That's the kicker.
I would be surprised. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I think if we plan to offer 100% virtual option, I think we need to have it better staffed in a way that it allows our teachers to be fully present for our in-person 5 days a week. But that's another conversation. But I'm hopeful that we can be 5 days a week, no virtual, possibly some safety precautions, possibly. We'll see. I'm just hopeful of that. No guarantees. I'm not in the crystal ball here.
All right. Do we have any more questions or comments on the going back to 5 days a week? Monday. If not, we'll call the question, please, Angie.
Duffy,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bush,
No.
Dunn,
No.
Eisner,
No.
Lindsay,
No.
Chambers,
No. Okay, Fund 46 summer project expenditures.
The operations committee met, discussed some of the Fund 46 expenditures. You have a copy in front of you. Last year, we started with a fund balance in Fund 46 of $693,000. The projects that were listed: purchasing the Ivy property, installing stairs in the bleachers, replacing 2 sets of doors on the north side of the middle high school gym, lights in the gravel parking lot, repaving the main driveway, and a one-time property tax payment on the Ivy property. Came out of that $693,000 with the deposit at the end of last year with some of the savings. We currently sit at a balance of $670,000. So in essence, we did all of those projects for $23,000.
Which I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm not seeing it posted on board book. Am I looking in the wrong spot? It's not.
Yes, yeah, I didn't have it in board book. I had it, sent it on the board pack, and I sent it out.
Is it in my email then?
Yeah, in the update, my Friday update.
In your Friday update, okay, thank you.
It would be in there.
If you go in Gmail, and are you in Gmail?
Yep.
I just searched Fund 46. It popped up. His email from February 19th.
Thank you.
So the top 2 items on the list are blacktopping the north parking lot, which we knew was an alternate bid, and we had said we wanted to pull that out. So we would get the most amount of project for our dollar amount. There wouldn't be anything going to HSR for design fees and Kramer's for construction markup. And trust me, when I put in a dollar amount as an expenditure, I tend to stay on the high side. So in essence, we're looking at that project not costing more than $80,000. Iverson's already has the bid to do the south side parking lot, the lower parking lot, and we're going to ask them to work on the top north parking lot at the same time. So when they were here, they put a bid in for the driveway, they put in a bid for the gravel parking lot, and they had given us a price reduction on the gravel since they were already gonna be here. So we're confident that $80,000 would be the top of the line for blacktopping the north parking lot. And then we got talked to a couple of contractors about putting some lights in that north parking lot for the elementary school. And again, that would not exceed $30,000. We would time that up so that there is underground cable pulled to one pole. We would have, if they're putting potentially 4 poles in, they would trench underground to the north side of the parking lot before blacktop would go in. So all of these things would take place and the blacktop would be the final coat. We have an issue in our locker rooms. The floor, the vinyl floor is 20+ years old, cracking. It's been repaired and replaced in sections. We replaced the high school boys locker room a few years ago. We have a bid to replace 3 locker room floors. The kitchen has the same style flooring, has the same issues. It's been there 20+ years, a lot of cracking. And then the ramp in the commons, we have the same issue. It's pulling up, it's cracking. There's some things that are going on. So to replace all of those would be at the cost of $40,000.
Rich, if I could.
Yep.
I'd just like to remind the board that last year, the price for doing the girls' locker room alone was $29,000. Look at this, everything we're getting now for $40,000. It makes me scratch my head a little bit as to how. I just wanted to throw that out.
A year ago, we had the next 2 paint the middle school, high school gym. And when I say paint, that is the ceiling and the walls. This is the same price the company quoted us a year ago. They will honor that price because they are also painting at the elementary school. And since we're on site, we would honor the price we quoted you a year ago to do that. And then on the list that I provided last year, we had Stocker flooring come in. Stocker flooring says you should strip down your gym floors every 8 to 10 years. Our gym floor is on 12 going on 13 years now. And when you strip it down, you sand everything off, all of the finishes, all of the paint, everything. They repaint it, restripe it, and reseal it. And that would be a cost of $35,000. And this was on last year's projects, and I just copied and pasted this in here. So my notes coming out of last year's operations committee was like, is this something we could do next summer? So that's why it's back here again. And then the elementary school dishwasher is on its last leg and or breath and needs to be replaced. We can replace it for the exact same size that we currently have for no more than $25,000. So if you were to approve all of those projects, that would be a total of $237 at the maximum. And that would leave $433,000 as a balance in Fund 46.
I guess I'll speak. I think that the sidewalk Larry brought up, in my opinion, probably jumps above some of these in terms of timeliness. While we have a civil engineer at our disposal, and probably can get or a little cheaper. Something outside of it. I don't have any idea. Does anybody here know what that project would cost?
I guess my question, Andy, would be then, which one would you substitute out potentially?
And if we can afford them all, then that's what we. I think before we paint the gym and strip the floor, giving our kids a sidewalk.
Okay.
So do you want to table this? And well, when do we need to know some of these myths?
Some of these are time sensitive because
Yeah. and
we
I'm
have
not
asked
saying-
companies, if it is approved at the board meeting tonight, we would notify them. Because they're trying to hold times within the summer that it would fit, that they could put us in their schedule and make these things happen.
That's why I'm curious. if anybody has any-
I could certainly
We have
give,
$10 a square foot for flat work, but that's, well, I mean, it'd be pretty simple, I mean, with the grade and everything, but.
Would we, sorry,
The design of the prep.
Yeah, you have to have, I mean, you probably have to have a curb there, obviously, so it's gonna be.
Is there a curve there?
no,
No,
There's not a
it goes
curb.
right.
There's no curve there at all.
Okay, so like we integrated.
We throw a stupid number.
Oh, golly.
geez, I'd be afraid to guess.
Easily, maybe more.
Engineer curve, possibly.
Much more than that.
I have no idea. That's what I'm asking. I didn't know.
Let's try to find out.
I could certainly give like
I mean,
Chase
if it-
Ivy a call.
I was gonna say,
Well,
no,
but I
Chase,
think it's gonna-
somebody at the city too. would
Yeah,
probably have a
I know
good-
Roger's talked with
That's what
Todd
I'm
Downey.
asking. I have
At
no
the
idea.
city
That's
crew
what we're talking.
So
less
you're,
than 6 figures.
okay, so you're, yeah,
That's what I'm looking.
Yeah,
for,
no,
is
no
we're
way.
not going to-
You don't think it'd be 6 figures?
4-inch.
I can't believe it. If it is, I'm.
That's
wrong
good.
way.
That's all. I'm looking for.
Now, I mean, is this,
I think we all are.
All of it done and do that.
Would
and
this
still have
be
plenty.
on city property? I mean, would this be who's responsible for sidewalks? Is it the landowner?
That's the thing, I don't know.
We'd have to.
But I think the city provides one process.
Would the city be responsible for the curb?
There's not on either side.
I don't
And
believe so.
Just what Larry observed,
I think
it is,
when-
I've seen.
if they were to
people
come
on
in
that
front of
road.
your house and have to tear up the curb, I believe that's the property owner's expense.
I have a question outside of the sidewalk, from this list. The gym floor, so I know that the contractor recommends that it be sanded down and repainted every 10 years. What is the condition of the gym floor? And is that one of those recommendations where, yep, it's ideal, but 15 is fine? Or is it, if we don't do this, we're going to permanently damage the floor and end up having to replace it later?
I don't think you'll permanently damage the floor. There are places that have been patched because some of the board, and I guess I didn't include that in this. There are some locations that boards will be replaced due to some damage on the boards. We're nowhere near, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, but several summers ago, there was an incident where a young lady dove for a loose ball on the floor, and because there was a sliver in the gym floor.
I don't want another accident.
So we're not there. We have patched some of those places, but part of this bid amount would be to replace those boards. Again, we're not there. If you decide not to do that, we'll get another year out of it.
Price is gonna go up though too.
But the prices will start going
Prices
up,
are-
yeah.
It also adds 2 more layers of steel, and every time we add steel, it becomes harder and harder to not make that a slippery surface. When all 12 years of steel stripped.
Yeah.
Between the brightness and the steel.
What if we approve these expenditures and then had the, operations committee look at the sidewalk
Yeah,
issue?
if we can fast track that and work with the city.
Yeah,
I
let's
just
do
wanted
it.
to
Let's
make-
look into
I
it
had no
tomorrow.
idea what
Call
the
Chase, call a couple of the local concrete guys.
Are you
Do you
okay
guys
with that?
think that since that's in the Oak Savannah, that's in?
We have to see with
I-
how
I
far
don't
it is
know,
in with.
I'm just asking about that, or would it have to be like a gravel path down the side instead of concrete?
Yeah.
Well, certainly it's on a bank there.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that.
I think it's doable. I would guess it's doable.
If it drops off quick enough too, then we're gonna have to have something.
I know Roger's had conversations in the past with the city crew about the sidewalk there, so I can touch base with Roger. I'll
He
look
may
into
have
it.
a number in mind.
He might, and then I'll, I know like Doug Fair had this flat work, I'll call Ivy's and just try to get a price, not to exceed and get that back for whether it's an operations committee or the next board meeting.
Okay.
That's all I was.
Totally.
Making sure it wasn't an exorbitant.
I can't see it being that much.
That one.
Which of these items are time sensitive?
The most time sensitive would be the gym floor and the painting of the gym. Because those contractors are trying to hold time for us if possible. You know, we've got a quote and then it's like, well, when would you be doing it? And well, again, if the board were to approve it, we would let them know, but they're trying to in their schedules. Iverson's, like I said, Iverson's has the bid for the lower parking lot, so I don't know that that's an emergency to contact them tomorrow to say, hey, we want you to do the upper parking lot, but probably the two of the most time sensitive would be those two painting projects.
And they were homeowners from a year ago, Mitch?
Correct.
And they didn't make the cut because just the price or?
I think, you know, the blacktop was well over 100,000. It was, and I think so. I think the dollar amount. The operations committee thought maybe we would look at, you know, everything didn't have to be done in year one. It could be pushed off to year two. So I think that was part of that conversation as well.
And certainly, even the lights on the parking lot could be kicked. If we were to put the conduit in under the blacktop and the basis in whether there's construction taking place, the lights could go up in another year. If we were looking at deferring, I'm going to guess half that amount, that 30,000.
You know, certainly there are two poles there.
Small amount.
Materials
going up. That's the question. But also interest rates are going up. So I think it's going to be interesting. We could postpone it and say, hey, maybe people will be looking for work next year because construction is going to slow down because at some point it seems like it has to, but it might just keep going up.
It's going to be gangbusters for a while.
Yeah. If you've shopped for houses lately,
Yeah.
you know, it'll be a while before there's.
300%.
So what about all of the items that we looked at the alternative bids and said, not now, but maybe in Fund 486? We're taking a big bite out of our balance with $230,000 worth of projects. We still have a nice balance left, but I don't want to. In my mind, we've kind of committed to some of those things. Does this prevent us from doing any of those?
No, those alternative bids would not wipe that fund balance out.
Okay,
and
thank
I'm
you.
still trying to use Fund 10 monies. An email has been sent out to staff about budgeting, whatever, you know, if you know you need it for this year yet, then you need to make that purchase order prior to spring break. So there are Fund 10 monies. There might be some of those alternate bids that I can take care of out of Fund 10 money and would need to be out of Fund 46.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is the dishwasher not working properly or just in need of repair?
Well, it is.
They needed a measurement because of the new one, correct?
Right. Yeah.
So basically,
There's a hood that's going in and it would go over the existing dishwasher. But that dishwasher, I saw it on a tour of the building. It's to the point where it can't be repaired. So the next time it breaks down.
we bought it used, right?
We bought it used. So it's served its purpose and it's really time to let it go on to greener pastures. So this price quote for dishwasher fits in that same spot so that the dimensions would work for the hood that they're going to install as part of the building project. The dishwasher itself was not part of the building.
I will entertain a motion unless we have one already.
No.
We're getting back to the sidewalk issue. If that's 100,000, I'm just going to. That'll take our balance down to 230 something or 130,000.
So it basically cuts you at about half,
Yeah.
just below half of your current balance.
So we'll the board.
I'd still be in favor.
Okay.
That sidewalk's not working.
And then to Joni's point, how much we left for what she the alternatives.
But the balance is 441, so we'd be down to 341.
I don't think the summation of all those projects was.
No, right.
No, it's just their hope that they don't run the extra cost in that building.
Don't say that.
I guess I was looking at 237,000.
It's the-
237 is what those costs. 433 is the balance.
No, I can't. No, I can do state stone for that. And that's where I think if we make a couple of calls right away tomorrow, we get some numbers, shoot a message out, but I mean, if it's that much. Yeah, I can't imagine it's that much.
We've got some fill, definitely.
I've got a lot of it.
I've got a lot.
And I don't know that it would go all the way to the corner because I do know there needs to be a retention pond for some of the water runoff. And down in that corner is where there's a drain underneath the road. So it might stop short of the corner, but if we can extend the sidewalk 9/10 of the way down there, that's a much safer place to be.
That's a good question. Where will it go when it gets there? Because there's no sidewalk on.
There's nothing on Fifth.
Diagonal bridge across.
Does anybody know what the policy is in the city with sidewalks? Are they responsible for sidewalks?
I know they went around and replaced a bunch in different areas, but I don't know what the reason was. But I know the city did replace.
Mr. England?
Could you even look at maybe Tower Street, which is a very short walk? It would teach the kids to walk down, let's say, a sidewalk on Tower Street to Wisconsin, which then has a sidewalk.
It's a great idea. Unfortunately, we don't own any property on Tower. We own the property on Coughlin. That's why it's easier for us to look at putting a sidewalk there.
Question the property owners in the city. Is that an option?
But I mean, and Tower Street's probably much less traveled than Coughlin during school hours. You say
I would agree.
pick up or drop off. I mean, that might be a good short-term fix, is just have staff direct kid traffic, walking traffic to Wisconsin instead of letting them go down Coughlin.
Instead of spending 100,000 direction of how we spend the students.
I'm not saying we don't need a sidewalk, but that's at least a good short-term fix. If you guys want to try that for the end of the school year and see how successful that is in terms of minimizing kids down Coughlin.
But anybody that's walking toward at the southwest corner of Mineral Point, past Fifth Street,
Southeast.
the south. Whatever corner that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're saying they're walking opposite direction to go.
Yeah. Maybe I'm thinking the houses behind Foster.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're thinking Foster's.
7th Street up in that area. What do they call that new subdivision over there?
Well, it's like somebody said too, throw a bunch of gravel down for now. They could walk on the gravel. But I think it's all options that we'll look into.
So how do we want to word a motion? Do we want to accept all of this and then have put some provision in the motion to move forward with the sidewalk as well?
I think we need to revisit that one once we have some figures. It's gonna take a while to get, it's not gonna be like, hey, we're ready to pour concrete. So I think once Mitch gathers some numbers and information, see what we have to do, see if it is an option.
I'm not sure we need a motion to have it discussed in committee. Unless you see differently.
No.
There seems like there's good support from the board.
So we're really just focused on.
Yes. Would anybody like to make a motion? Any more discussion?
And an item to add to that is to price out potential sidewalk.
If there's nothing else, Andrew, will call a question, please.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Stefan,
Yes.
Solomon,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Heinzman,
Yes.
Chambers.
Yes. Approve additional staffing requests.
So this went to the personnel committee And we have 3 positions we're looking at. The first one is someone to help support the social emotional needs of our students. It was listed in the board book as a 100% position, but in the conversation, it could potentially be anywhere from 80% to a 100% position. One of the biggest reasons for a little bit of that flexibility. Our local experts know some people that maybe stepped away from a full-time position for child rearing responsibilities and may be interested maybe in an 80% position, which would be 4 days a week. There might be somebody that's, no, I'll do it, but I want 5 days a week. So we didn't want to limit the possibilities for potential people to fill this position. I'll turn it over to Angie and Caitlin.
But I think just one clarification for how it's listed, we're hoping that this can be a social emotional learning coach, not a counselor, because when we were talking about potential staff, licensed staff who could fill this, it could be a guidance counselor, it could be a social worker, it could be a school psychologist. So coach was just a little more flexible in the wording. But again, I know social emotional learning and helping our students through this pandemic has been talked a lot about this year, especially. But I think one thing that we wanted to focus on is just because the pandemic is coming to an end, the trauma that our students have sustained this year is going to be lingering for years to come. And so we're trying to look at how our, what assets we currently have and where our gaps are. And so this is a proposal of an additional staff member to hopefully fill some of those gaps. It is listed as a district employee, but we would potentially rework some of our staff so that we could focus on, like Caitlin could focus her role at one level and this person could focus his or her role at the other building and not have to go back and forth between the two, because there's a lot of lost contact time when you're traveling between the 2 buildings. But we're really just trying to be proactive with what our students are needing. And we're seeing a lot of gaps with coaching and being able to provide individual and small group counseling, as well as coaching and helping our teachers understand accommodations and learning plans and supports that students might need in the classroom. So those are kind of the areas that I wanted to highlight. I don't know if you have more.
Yeah, I think, I think you were all sent the larger slide that we had gone over with the personnel committee. But just to kind of summarize, Wainwright has it up on the board. As you can see, there's overall recommendations for ratios for school psychologists and guidance counselors. One thing that I think makes it challenging, especially at the elementary level, is that our guidance counselor is also teaching like an encore. So her role is similar as like Mr. Ingwell, where she has the same set schedule, but then she's also expected to see a lot of students. I am supporting at the elementary level, but I'm also supporting at Options. I'm supporting with middle school and high school students. I am meeting with students one-on-one, and I'm doing a few small groups. But I also, that's about 33% when I had broken it down. I think it was like 33% of my role is that, and I would say there's about 24-ish students that I'm meeting with. A big gap that I see is that I think that we especially need to be having more proactive supports for our students. I'd like to see more support, especially with like building communication, with working with our middle school and high school staff. Due to the nature of this year, that's been just a little bit more challenging, and because of how like being spread so thin, it's been challenging to get to all of the meetings and to be able to have really good, meaningful discussions with teachers. And I also see a piece of my, the piece that I think has helped to support building supports for all of our families has also been like bridging community connections, working with local physicians, working with the food pantries, setting up, like working with some churches, helping to get families set up with things that they need over the holidays. Those have been things that have been really helpful in like getting families what they need, and then also supporting having like a positive mutual relationship with them, so that I've had some good ongoing communication with them. What questions do you have about all of this?
No argument with the need. I guess one question I had was about the FAST program. That, forgive me if I'm not describing it correctly, but it was basically kind of a effort spearheaded by the guidance counselor and some parent volunteers that were trained to facilitate family connections and family socialization. Obviously, I can see why the program didn't happen this year, but that seems like a program that can meet some of the goals you described in terms of communication, bridging connections, those kind of support. Can you just speak to the status of that program and how that would play a role?
Yeah, so I know we're very interested in having the program come back, and I know I had shared kind of an update about FAST with Mitch and Matt at the time. The two staff who were trained, our school nurse and our school counselor, obviously have both left the district. So I think one is we need to get current staff trained. Last year, the counselor that retired came back and ran that program for us for a pay, but I think that's one step. I mean, I know we're very interested in continuing the program. We've seen some good results of it, but we have to make sure our current staff are trained in the program. And I think that's just one portion, because from what I understood of the program, it's a small population of students. I want to say there was maybe 12 families. So yes, it's a great program, but it's really targeted in a scope. And so I think, hiring this role would have a much broader scope for the number of students and families that could be impacted in a positive way.
And I wish
I was just gonna say, Mr. Renwick kind of helped bring FAST here from another school district, so if you have questions specific to FAST, he can certainly answer this for you.
This person could potentially be the FAST coordinator, for example, getting trained themselves, and then coordinate. Almost like my last district, it was a social worker that was run, because they, correct me if I'm wrong, but the social worker tends to have a little bit more influence in the community at home. Like a true social worker might, but it's housed in a school. So if you were to hire someone like that, that's kind of perfect fit for that. So they could, short answer, they could spearhead that. But we would have to get retrained because we lost a big discipline.
And I would also say, something that we've played around with too, like if I were able to focus on one or two buildings more so, say I was at the elementary and the options was one idea, then I could be that trained person and look into that, because I feel like I have been kind of dabbling in that social worker role. Something that we are doing, we're thinking about that being like a small population. We actually maybe 2 weeks after the pandemic had shut everything down last year, we were going to do a book club where it was like a book study around the child whisperer, and it talks about different energy types of students. And we had a lot of very interested parents in that. And I'm actually talking right now, I think our librarians, Nikki and Chris, are writing a grant, a national grant to do some more book studies. And that was one piece of it. So we're also looking at some other things to bring community members into it. So that's something that we will continue to be pursuing. But again, this person could help, and I think it would just help us to be making sure that we're getting these things at all levels.
What's the ESSER true money? I'm not familiar with ESSER.
So that's the secondary cares.
We got the first round, it was CARES or ESSER.
Oh, I didn't know what ESSER was.
And this is round 2.
So are we creating a permanent position here? I see there, maybe could be.
I think the long-term implications of this are still unknown to some degree. I mean, I feel that once the person got here, we're going to be able to identify very quickly services, and I mean, ideally, right, those services would eventually be able to fall off, but I do think that it, you know, I'm kind of seeing it as more of a permanent fix with a refocus every year on whether it's so necessary.
So this is budget neutral then, in that sense?
This would have an impact to the budget. In a preliminary budget scenario.
Yeah.
Marcia has created a budget that has this position in it as a paid position. Budgetarily, it's going to require someone with a master's degree to fill that position. But it is also something that the ESSER monies could pay for. Providing social and emotional support for students is money. So it could have no impact if we were to look at taking the salary 100% out of the ESSER funds. It's
for the first year.
Well, you have up till September of 23 to spend out ESSER 2. And the $1.9 trillion package has been changed somewhat, but from one of the last meetings I was involved in with superintendents, they were calling it ESSER 3. There would be additional monies coming to schools to support school districts for things like this. So there could be some, I mean, the amount of money that we're supposed to be getting for ESSER would easily cover this position for more than 1 year if we took 100% of this position out of that fund.
But there's offsets that we would not.
There would be other areas within education, learning loss, those kinds of things that money can also be used for.
My question would be, I think this, first of all, the notes from the personnel committee, I think you guys did a great job asking questions. And this is supported, so I support it. I think there was a need here before the pandemic. I don't think this is pandemic created. I don't think it's going away. I don't think it's necessary because of the long-term effects, but I think we were shorthanded when it came to mental health in this district prior to the pandemic. In the sense that we were bringing an outside source in to provide services that we could. So I support it. My question would be, what do you foresee the offset in the budget? Assuming no new money is something has to come out to put this in.
Well, the only reason it's affordable in the budget now is because I don't have the budget requests for staff for next year, the classroom budget requests. So once that's laid in, then I'll have a better understanding of, okay, what might need to be looked at differently. What do we have to do without, if 100% of this salary was coming out of the school district budget and not using any of the ESSER money, then there might be things we would have to look at differently.
To be fair, didn't we do that to the staff last year? Say to them, like, you have to cut down on the budget?
Yep.
So you put it that way, is that really fair to do it 2 years in a row?
It's unfortunate, but I think it is also the reality. I still don't know what we're to expect from the state. The governor had said he wanted to give $750 per pupil and then another 10% for any student that's economically disadvantaged. When that was presented to the legislature, we're scrapping all of that. We're going to start with our own number, but they haven't released what those numbers are. So I have no idea where the final budget numbers are going to come in. He also said, I'd like to add $200 per pupil, the revenue limit for first year and $200 for the next year. Again, throw that out. So the most unfortunate thing for school districts is we want to have a preliminary budget for approval so that we can start purchasing things for the next school year over the summer. We set the levy in October, and I have no idea when the legislature is going to say, here's what you can expect to receive for state funds.
And obviously this is just your opinion. Well, if the special ed match gets increased, will they take that out of our formula, or will they allow us to maintain the funding level we're at, and their match is higher, allowing us to free up additional monies for expenses?
The proposal is presented by the governor was additional monies.
Okay.
So we get 28 cents on the dollar. His proposal for next year would be 45 cents on the dollar, and the next year 50 cents on the
And they
dollar.
won't affect
That would not affect
formula.
it. In essence, it would allow more money to stay in Fund 10. We transfer over $1 million from Fund 10 to Fund 27 because we only get just a little bit over a
28
quarter.
cents.
you
And
know.
28 high. I mean,
Right,
it's been
yeah.
24, 25 usually.
If it went to 50 cents for every dollar, we would easily fund all three of these positions with no impact to the budget whatsoever.
And we'll have an answer for year 2 at the SSER for you.
Correct.
Which may assist us in, give teachers some requests.
Right.
Having a better idea.
I was hoping I'd have some better budget numbers, but I would like to have a finance committee meeting to really look at these numbers and the impact of the budget. If I can get a better sense of what even the Republican controlled legislature is looking at, what they come back with their budget plan. So
For the near term, I would support additional help. Long term, I'm not sure. I mean, I think the board needs to be reminded that a short time ago that the pupil services director was our school psychologist in the same position. So we've already created an extra position. You gotta remember, we have a guidance counselor in this building. Matt, you got a guidance counselor in your building.
that's always been the case.
Right, and we got a principal in each building, although maybe not a psychologist by definition, but certainly should be there to help.
I get what you're saying.
That's
don't think
fine.
you're-
I
don't think
just
you're
think that
completely
we're-
wrong.
That's
And
where
I just want to, not to negate the person because the role when it was combined, I can't imagine it. But when Caitlin and I arrived and we were talking about division of duties, we had 2 504 plans across the entire district. We now have, over 20. There were no individual counseling services being provided by the school psychologist. And as Caitlin said, she's seeing more than 24
And
students.
those are students without IEPs or without it written in the 504s as well. We've also written psych services into IEPs, which is also reimbursed through Medicaid as well. I think there's maybe 8 to 10 students that I see on a regular
I
basis.
understand. Is there additional help, let's say, outside help through CISA 3?
I don't know school psychologists, yes, you could probably contract with CISA for those services at a cost. I don't think that they have employed social worker or guidance counselors. Not that I know of, and I don't even know what when I first started, they used almost all of the psychologists were hired through CISA 3 and then sent out to the schools. And now almost all of them are hired by the schools independent of CISA. So, it's certainly, you could put in a request for it. I'm not sure that you'd get the dollar for dollar. You're paying CISA, who's adding some additional costs for their services. I'm not sure that it would be a cost equivalent or a savings to us to contract with us. We would certainly be able to look into it, but I would just guess it would be
With
more.
your license, Angela, are you able to step in temporarily as a counselor?
No, my main license is a teacher. So I'm licensed as an elementary teacher and a special education teacher in 2 different areas. So I don't have some directors, a lot of the directors for special education are typically either school psychologists by training or teachers by training. And I am a teacher by training. So I don't have the counseling psychology background that a psychologist would have.
To go this route, Mitch, what kind of price tag are we looking at, salary and benefits?
I think Marcia used $75,000
For salary.
for salary and benefits.
And benefits.
So again, it would be a master's, whatever our master's step is, because to be certified in either one of those 3 areas, it's a master's level.
And right, and as I said, right, that's figured in for budget. And there is a budget surplus, but I don't have any classroom requests that offset that budget surplus as it sits right now.
Is there a process for reviewing a position after, say, a year or a certain period of time? Or another approval, or, you know, if we wanted to approve this for a trial period to reevaluate?
I think
the
it's certainly
need
at
for
the
the
board's
position.
discretion to talk through that.
We always talk about volunteers, Doc. I mean, is that possible with a position like this?
I guess I would throw it back to Angie and Caitlin, but I would look at probably the nature of some of the conversations, the level of confidentiality that somebody would have to have.
I would say no, if not for that position. I think we can have volunteers. Angie and I have been in close contact with Cummins. I've met with other people that are interested in supporting the school. I talked about the possibility of them mentoring some of our students. I think there's like mentorship opportunities, but the in-depth weekly check-ins, I think that also needs to be somebody with that training and someone that, like, personally, like, I feel like I'm not going to give it to somebody that doesn't have that amount of training. I'm not going to say I'm going to have your child be meeting with somebody that's a volunteer. I think that's more of a mentorship position, if that makes sense.
I think Doc has a good point here, especially if we've got some potential candidates in mind. For work to be approved. We may still have the same candidates because of the situation and percentage that we would be approved long term.
Our contract's typically a year, and they just automatically renew.
Right.
And then just to be clear, that possible 75,000 could also possibly be only 80% time.
And I will be honest, there's a number of grants through DPI. So, you know, DPI is a big push right now for social workers. And if it was somebody with a social worker training, we would absolutely be applying for the grant application. There's a grant application open for mental health wraparound services. So, like, we're trying to look for opportunities to be able to offset the cost for you. A lot of it depends on what their licensing is.
And I also am 90%.
So the first year, it sounds like it possibly could be budget neutral. That's thereafter. And the board's got to remember, we have 2 more requests coming up also. So if we're having a problem budgeting this one, we still have 2 more.
Well, I thought he said it might be budget neutral.
The next one.
Potentially.
The next one's a budget neutral.
You can use
The next position.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that ESR money can be spread out more than.
So the next the options.
Yes, that one's neutral.
Neutral for forever.
I did not hear the word forever in the meeting, but
When we get to that one, I can explain the funding options we have there.
you want to hear all positions and
I
then
think,
vote on them?
I think that's bigger.
I just, as you know, before, we're gonna start looking at other ways to fund a position. If you don't have the money, you probably shouldn't be spending it.
Get you out here by 10 o'clock.
From your list. So the next proposal that we have would be to consider moving from Amanda as the educator, the sole educator out at Options, to having Amanda plus a full-time special education teacher. So currently we provide an assistant to assist Amanda. You know, and in the committee, we went through a lot of examples about what can an assistant do versus what can a teacher do. This is largely led just based upon the number of students with IEPs that are being serviced out at Options. We also have a really unique situation. So UW Whitewater started a program this year for special education assistants who are in the field but want to change over to a teaching license. It's a direct pathway from being an assistant to a special education teacher. So the assistant that is currently out at options is doing this pathway. So her first semester next year, she'll actually be student teaching in her practicum setting at our options program. So essentially we get a special education teacher for free first semester. And so what we're asking for is that second semester, we would be able to post and hire a full-time special education teacher. So that's kind of on the cost part. The difference analysis was about $16,000 a year. So it's about $8,500 per semester difference. And Amanda and I talked about some funding options. Amanda's willing to take a portion of her budget that is currently used for contracted services. Thank you. I couldn't think of it.
Some of you who have been on the board for a while may remember that when we, my first year, it was just me. Second year, we kind of figured out sort of what we were doing, and we set aside money for contracted services because we knew that we only had one teacher and that there was going to be educational needs for students. And so that allowed us to kind of contract out with that. And so that will allow us to be able to reallocate part of this. And obviously being able to get a teacher full-time will be far more beneficial than contracting out.
And then again, the rest of that money would come from special education funds. So currently the person's salary is split between the state money that we are given with the 28% reimbursement and the federal funds that we are allocated through a grant 50-50. So we could either, I mean, we could play around, and I would probably play around with Marcia about depending upon if it does actually go to 45%, we'll probably shift a little more into the state money. But that grant money, that's that carryover money that we sometimes talk about being able to have, we have some carryover dollars again that I could take it out of carryover money and it's not going to impact the budget. So that's why we say it's budget neutral. So we would be able to continue to pay for, you know, a potential, again, not for her because it would be open for applicants, but for the role in the same format that we are now and not impact regular education dollars. And it just happened to work out. It worked out perfectly with us only having to do one semester to bring forward to you instead of a full year.
How many students do you have?
23 is all.
You have 23. In capacity is 30. Did I read that?
You may have read that. I suppose on a normal year it could be. It really depends on the sessions and the times that the students are in. Really like 8 at a time is our ideal. So if we have students who are attending 3/4 of their day in the high school and coming out for 2 hours, they could be doing that 7th and 8th hour or 1st and 2nd hour. And then we have sort of a more self-contained group that we serve for 4 hours a day. So yeah, in an ideal world, if the schedule works out, 30 is good. Based on, again, the needs of the students. And each time we bring somebody in, they really have to be able to fit the program. And that's been one of the things I think since I've been here that we've been able to figure out with that balancing.
And your
point.
budget, you've been running in the green for the most part.
Yep.
Right? Good for you.
We have, this year we have 4 contracted students, and we're talking with a couple of districts about adding already students for the fall based on things. So we have continued to serve more and more Mineral Point students.
Right.
We've continued to serve more Mineral Point students in sort of a spectrum of services compared to what the traditional alternative school used to be. And I think that having that ability this last spring and through this school year has worked out really well for students in our district.
Do you think if we had this position, you still will operate in the green? Is that fair?
Yeah, because I mean, I envision being able to contribute twice what we're asking for the first year from my budget in just terms of reallocating that. And Angie gets to be the wizard of the special ed money, but if she can continue to match her contribution on a semester basis, we're not going to have an issue. And I feel like if I had to choose, I would be able to do more if I needed to do more, because I think the most important thing for the kids.
And there's always 2 of you in the building all day long, right?
we
So let
provide
me just-
transportation for a few students.
So one of us will be out transporting students while the other is there. So we are not, we are better covered, I feel like, than what we used to be, but we're not, there is not always two people in the building.
And this position won't change that.
It won't,
No.
it will just change what that person can do, so like, yeah. It's just very subtle differences probably, but like, you know, having two teachers would allow somebody to really get into creating and to helping to deliver and design the curriculum. So an assistant can help deliver whatever I put together, but bringing somebody else who can help with some of that creation. The other thing is we have a number of students with IEPs. And so anytime there's an IEP meeting or a meeting about a concern, I'm the only one going to that because I'm the only teacher. So having somebody else who can be involved in that is just helpful for the kids. We can be much more interchangeable, if that makes
Could
sense.
the transportation be modified where you wouldn't have to do it or the other person?
Probably not without
Another.
figuring out some kind of, yeah, there would be some kind of fiscal cost to that. So I would say like if we have a situation, if we feel like the other person is not, you know, safe, there have been times that I've called and asked for people to help with transportation. So I don't feel like doing the transportation puts us in a vulnerable position, if that's kind of what your concern is. Because we do have plenty of backup opportunities. You know, Matt's brought kids out before. I can call and Bill can run somebody out. Kids can always stay. We just do what we need to and kind of make adjustments on the fly.
I think one thing that this position would really help with case management wise is currently our 2 high school staff members are case managers for students who might only attend in the options building and trying to be able to schedule time for them to go out and build a relationship and see them on a consistent basis has been extremely challenging. You know, you can't schedule 2 hours on a Monday when you're in a class all the other times. So this would allow whoever that person is hired with to be able to really provide and case manage on a direct basis instead of really putting the layer of compliance and monitoring on Amanda and her role out there and then trying to communicate with her. So.
Do you remember?
I was just wondering if the increase of capacity with 2 teachers would get more kids from outside districts. Is there a net financial benefit to options with every contracted student that comes over, and then that could support this overhead?
Well, and I think we're projecting, you know, like our contracted numbers are down this year in comparison to other numbers, I think just with schools and how services are running. But I think we're projecting that we're going to see an increase next fall when schools come back to a more traditional schedule and find students who are, you know, maybe some credit deficiency or really struggled this year that need some alternative ways to get back up to speed. So
I think the other thing is, and I feel like I've had this conversation before, we've never put a financial value on what we provide for our own students. And I don't necessarily feel like we need to, because I just think we need to do what we need to do. So I guess if we were trying to figure out what other districts should contribute, we'd have to maybe more take time to figure out what we feel like our value is and what is it. You know, we haven't increased budget, we haven't spent more, we haven't done whatever, we've just worked with what we had. And so I think, yes, we want to serve whatever students we can serve, and each student that comes from an outside district comes with additional money to come back into it. So I don't know how, and I guess I can let you deal with that because I'm the teacher at heart. I don't know how much, where those numbers need to be, where everybody feels about those things.
I know
we bring it up occasionally, but then we never sort of have figured out what the.
And I know when Marcia projects the preliminary budget, we talk about like, what do we foresee for contracted services? So anything beyond that number is, in addition that we didn't know about. And helps the number in the long run.
And I think it goes back to the district as a whole, so we've never allocated it just for options, so there's been give and take throughout the different years.
I see.
Which I'm not opposed to or whatever, but it's just been, that's on. Which probably best takes into account the fact that you're gonna have different numbers. Y'all are still welcome to come.
Thank you, Amanda.
In the last position, we had this conversation a year ago. We talked about the building project, about adding another full-time maintenance staff position. The vision position being split the majority of the time at the elementary school. In a perfect world, I could see the schedule being a Wednesday through Sunday. So we cover the weekends when we have people wanting to use the buildings during the school year. So we're adding square footage, we're adding more carpeting, which is going to take more time to clean on a regular basis. So we would like to post for 100% full-time position in our maintenance department. We'd really like to, if possible, to get the person hired before the summer so that they can be learning equipment and be a part of the building and what's going on and help with the cleaning and the moving and the maintaining of both buildings this summer. And that would have the position at the start of the next school year.
Yes, because I'm. Yeah. And to take a cut in his capital projects or capital maintenance, $100,000 put it out year by year for that this position. Smaller number in the budget for that.
I would say yes.
Not that I'm suggesting that, but if we had to go for an offset.
I've heard many times when they moved from the old building to this building that they were going to have more staff, they weren't hired. Well, it's not going to take you as long to clean this building, because it's just more energy efficient. It's like what you might have gone from 50,000 square feet to 100,000 square feet. And I don't care who you are, you've got that much more floor space. It's going to take you longer to clean it. And those staff were never added at that time. So we're kind of in that same position. We're adding more square footage to that building. Like I said, classrooms that'll now be carpeted. So a dry mop in and out around isn't going to cut it. In this room, it's going to take you a while to vacuum this room. The classrooms aren't this big, but if they're all predominantly carpeted, it is going to take longer for staff to clean.
How many staff would Roger got now altogether? I know we added one or had a half.
We have 2 half-time in each building. And then there is a 2 full-time at the elementary and 2 full-time in this building.
We still have a 2 half-time?
Yes.
For each building, 1 for each building.
Yes.
We got 2.5 for a building.
Correct. And I'm not a medical professional, nor do I play one on TV, but I would have to say the reason the flus are down and strep throats down and colds are down and influenza's down has to probably do with hand washing, social distancing, face masking, and potentially the cleaning protocols that we're going through using the UV light and the foggers. So I would certainly push the maintenance staff in the evenings next year when we get to cold and flu season and strep throat season to continue the same cleaning procedures that we're using now.
Just to be devil's advocate, I mean, this hire is for the new addition of the elementary.
We see it, yes, we see it being a position that could be split between both buildings, but yes, predominantly to help with the cleaning at the elementary school.
Okay.
So if it was 100% position, it might be 80-20 or something of that nature.
Okay. So that would give the elementary school more janitorial staff than this building.
Correct.
Is the elementary school be bigger than this building with the new addition?
I don't think it would be bigger, but I think that the cleaning procedures that need to take place are different. We have very few rooms that have carpeting in this building. They, more of them are on tile floor, so the dry mopping through, it's the job done.
Okay. Is one of the halftime employees interested in full-time employment, Mitch?
They might be. We have not broached this with anybody yet, and I have to correct myself. There's an extra full-time person up here in the evenings. We have 2 full-time and a part-time over here. So we actually have 3.5 staff members in this location.
3.5.
Yeah.
Middle high school.
Middle high school, yes.
And 2.5 at the elementary.
Correct.
Want to add more.
We're looking to add a full-time.
I'm just asking the question, is 7 employees with the 2 buildings? I simply don't know. Is that adequate? Is that not enough, or is that too much?
I would say it's not too much. I believe when Roger has talked about coming here, there's going to be at least 2 additional employees just for this building alone. And that never materialized.
Does the 7 include Roger?
No.
So there's 8.
And that, all that includes the grounds as well. You know, mowing, snow removal, all that.
And in the summer, I mean, how many school kids usually are hired throughout the summer for the mowing?
Well, not just for mowing, but I think last year we had 6. I'm not sure. Do we have that many applicants this time?
Yeah, we have 6 right now.
Okay.
We have 6 that'll be hired.
We have 6 applicants currently. He's looking at least 6 because of the work at the elementary.
What cost do you think it is?
If it's somebody on staff, I mean, right now, starting pay for maintenance is, I think it's $12.50 an hour. That's our lowest category. Everybody else starts at $13.50, but our maintenance for some reason starts at $12.50. If it's somebody on staff, it might at least be, they're going to maintain that. If it's a half-time coming to full-time, they would certainly maintain their same salary. And one of our half-time has been here several years, so they moved up the salary schedule. So you look 40 hours at $12.50.
And the reason I was asking about it, one of the halftime employees was interested in full-time, and possibly the board would try, that would increase it by 1/2 of it.
Potentially.
Is there a standard maintenance personnel per so many kids in the school?
Probably more square footage would be my, and that would be a question I'd have to ask Roger, but I imagine it comes down to size of the building versus the number of students. The number of classrooms, the 2 people here at night are the ones that are also responsible for cleaning up after home athletic events, so they do their normal and then they have to jump into the gym to help get that cleaned up and tear things down and put everything away. So that's why there was an additional night person, full-time night person up here.
Was this Roger's request? You may have mentioned that.
Yeah, this was.
And we no longer have a weekend person.
Yeah, the weekend person has landed a full-time position, so we don't have anybody covering anything on the weekends.
Was that both Saturday and Sunday?
Yep.
8 hours a day-ish?
10.
It was 10 hours a day.
10 hours.
20 hours.
Well, let's start talking about these. Does anybody want to make a motion to hire one of these, two of these, or three of these?
I got
Start
one more
somewhere.
question on the maintenance stuff.
Okay.
How many hours do they need to work before we need to offer them benefits? Mitch?
1,000 hours, state law.
Uh,
Yes.
20 hours.
It has to be more than 20.
Is it? Because it's 1,000
I
hours.
thought it was 30.
I think
I
it's
think it has to
30.
be 30 hours a week in order to qualify for vets per handbook language.
I mean, is that an option for us?
Bump them up to what, 30 hours?
30 hours a week, to make it non-benefit eligible. I think at this point.
If you want to incentivize it, you want to keep one of the part-time staff to full-time. And that would be the way, because didn't we have a hard time finding a part-time guy?
Yes.
And then quality of personnel as well.
That's where,
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe we could do that, offer it to our halftime employees and say we would make that position full-time with benefits, or if that's not an option, then the second option will be a 30-hour non-benefit eligible. It would cost, it would cut the cost approximately half, I'd say.
So Roger's not here to speak to it, but during the personnel committee, he was fairly passionate that he had been putting off adding staff. He had been told over the years several times that when this happened, we would add staff to cover the additional space. It's happened to him over and over. And was really hopeful that this time we would finally add the staffing that he needed to.
yeah. And we got to remember that, some of the staff aren't 25 years old running around.
Yeah, I know where you're going, I just.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much what I'm saying.
Right.
So,
But I'm just looking at the budget.
yeah, no, I get it.
We got one that's paid for, maintenance request, and the other two.
Looking at possibly $100,000 in the budget.
We are, and that's, and we're not sure, again, I hate to go back to these kids that open the road out. We don't know the status of that for next year.
Well, let's start to separate these out and see what we got.
I'll move that we approve the special education instructor for options.
I'll second that.
All right. Let's start somewhere.
It's called low hanging fruit.
Yeah. Any more conversation on that position? All right, we'll call the question, please.
Special ed, that option.
Instructor.
Instructor, excuse me. That options, done.
Yes.
Tyson,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Stefan,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Chambers.
Yes. All right, I will entertain the motion for A or C.
I'll move that we approve letter A, which is social emotional counselor / coach. As recommended out of committee. I think mental health need is great, and I like that we could potentially offset the cost for 2 years and reassess it, the need on an annual basis. So, how about I'll make a motion to approve that position. I was rambling a little bit, so I'll make a motion to approve that position, social emotional counselor, with intent to review the position at the end of 21-22 school year.
I'll second.
Any discussion on this position?
The question I have
Yes.
is, will the posting be advertised as a 1-year position?
No, it's reviewed in 1 year.
all contracts are 1 year, right? Automatically, you can't sign someone to a long-term contract?
You're saying making it clear
In the interview process, we could certainly make
To
it
this-
clear that
this is
position will
made,
be reviewed at the end of the school year.
So will there be official board action then, on this particular position, or will it just be reviewed by Angela and you, Mitch, and
Nope, it'll come back to the school board.
for this, the same discussion, not for an overall approval of contract?
As the motion is stated, it would be coming back for review at the end of a year, so it would come back to the school board at the end of a year to review. Do you wish to see this position continue?
And just as long as everybody's clear, and I'll support it if we do that, and then there'll have to be action by this board to continue it.
Correct. Well, what's a good time to do that? Would it be an April meeting or the March meeting?
March meeting would be the best
Yeah,
opportunity to do
because we
that.
have to give sufficient time if we're not renewing
Gonna
the
renew.
contract.
Okay.
is there any other questions or comments on?
Are we not stipulating, there was some 80% figures thrown around.
Did that have to do with the person that may be interested, correct? Or are we?
No, we were just
kind of,
hypothesizing,
okay.
and I think the committee specifically asked a question about, what staffing level there would be, and I believe it was Joan that recommended that we should post from 80 to 100%, and depending upon the applicant, select the best applicant for the position, and then work out with them what their comfort level was.
I think the wording was that we might potentially get better qualified candidates at 100%. And if the negotiation would take them down to where the negotiations would then happen.
So my thought was, the request originally came in at 80. If we're paying benefits, salary plus benefits on somebody, and we have somebody who would be interested, be willing to go 100, we get more bang for our buck. I mean, the overall dollars are still hard to budget to, but the benefits piece of this costs us the same at 80 or at 100, 80% or 100%. So for the per hour service that they would provide to the district, we get more value if somebody is interested in 100%. So between knowing that we would potentially get a broader candidate pool and potentially a better candidate by offering a range of 80 to 100%, and knowing that we could potentially get more value per dollar spent by having a 100% candidate, we felt that a range would be an option.
Okay. And
Andy, does my motion allow for that flexibility for you?
I believe so.
I didn't specify that. I just. Right.
Because I think the position presented to you had a range included, and if you're
Okay.
saying it based upon how it was presented to you, then I would assume that.
Okay, that sounds good.
okay. If there's no more questions or comments on this position, we will call the question, please.
The motion is to approve with consent to review it after the 21-22 school year. Dunn,
Yes.
Tyson,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Becker,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Chambers.
Yes. And on to the full-time janitor, 100%.
I'll second it.
Who seconded?
Gary. My biggest thing here is Roger doesn't ask for much, and if he's.
No, he does not ask for much.
If he's really asking for this, then
The fail safe would be the $1,000 capital.
Yeah, he usually does a nice job. of
doesn't
only
use it.
touching that.
Yeah.
That's where it goes.
And if all of a sudden we got a bunch of people standing around, we can, up and down.
Hey, you're not up for it.
Weekend position is no longer, so it really it's about half
That's right, it's a head position in a sense. You've got to do that.
I think just as it's been said, we just have to take staffing hires very seriously from a budgetary standpoint, because they're usually permanent, you know, and they're costly, and it's gonna carry through with us every year, and we have hard times, so we just have to just really make sure that it's the right decision. I don't disagree, but these are significant decisions, no doubt.
Okay.
We have a motion.
Yeah, okay, we did. We'll call the question, please, Angie.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Stefan,
No.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Chambers.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're last. Dunn,
Yes.
Eisner,
Yes.
Chambers,
Yes,
sorry.
that's okay. I thought it was. Business services, credit card statement of activity and approval of bills payable. You make the motion for both or separate?
I got one question. We were never gonna pay these bills and they weren't itemized. And here, I take it Andy submitted these bills without, maybe he's got an explanation, but we were told that we would not pay bills that weren't.
Didn't have a detail.
Andy, false goes, none of his go.
Are you talking the credit card? Dr.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
Amazon.
thought we were gonna see them once they have the listing. That's my only question on the whole business. Otherwise. There's a huge amount, but it's not. It says taxes, I mean, I assume that's separate from the rest of these.
I think it is.
The one above that taxidermy, I don't know what that code is, Mitch, do you have any idea?
It's a high school account. It might be something that Mr. Robinson might have needed.
Andy Paul skills, that's all that was written on there.
I'm wondering if it wasn't textbooks.
All I can say is we had made the comment, we weren't gonna pay those bills or unless they were itemized. I have a hard time approving that without knowing what they were.
24.
The taxidermy one struck me as odd too. I couldn't quite place.
Mr. Robinson does a taxidermy class.
Oh, there's an actual, okay.
Yeah.
So that makes more sense.
Yeah.
Well, Marcia Jones one that and she might have mounted a deer head or something.
Not for that
She ran
price.
one
The
over.
stuffed squirrel for
Yeah, I'd like
for
that.
the office wall.
That'd be a good deal.
That's just the form, just the years.
I agree with Dr. Lindsay. However, this amount is $218. So next time.
Yeah, or at least fill in the blanks.
Fill in the blanks.
There was nothing on the sheet, I couldn't tell.
Yeah, otherwise, I mean, I make a motion to approve both. But please fill in the blanks.
If we could maybe have an update on what those are, I guess that's something if you'd like that.
Matt's looking into it right now.
We do have a motion and a second right now.
Only 218. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
It's interesting, I've heard Hilltopper a couple times.
Would you get
Hilltopper?
You don't
Do
do
that
that.
little thumping sound, yeah.
Very well could.
Nothing on the receipt, so we-
I'm sorry, I can get in and kind of see like a chart of accounts or whatever, but every time it won't let me get into that account right now. So I will get an answer and send it out to all board members tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve both. Is there any more questions or concerns? Comments? No? Call the question on that, please, Angie.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Stefan,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Dunn,
Yes.
Eisner,
Yes.
Chambers.
Yes. I will entertain a motion to go into convene a closed session to discuss past disciplinary actions.
Well, thank you everyone for attending today.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, second.
Who seconded?
Dr. Lindsay.
Oh, question, please.
Sullivan?
Yes.